Good morning. I'm Kenya McDuffie, at-large council member and chair of the Council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today is Wednesday, April 12th, 2023, and we're convening this hearing in a hybrid fashion, both via Zoom and from room 120 of the Johnny Wilson Building. The hearing is also being streamed live on the council's website, and the time is 9:09 a.m. I'm calling to order this budget oversight hearing. This is the committee's final budget oversight hearing for the fiscal year 2024 budget season. As I've stated during each of the committee's budget oversight hearings, we must all acknowledge that our government of the District of Columbia is in a different place financially than it has been in the past years. Federal funds we received in previous years to assist with the pandemic recovery efforts are sunsetting. And per the Office of the Chief Financial Officer's February revenue estimate, the district's revenue forecast has been revised downward by $81 million in fiscal year 2024, $183 million in fiscal year 2025, $200 million in fiscal year 2026. This calls for some pretty tough decisions to be made over the next several weeks as the council reviews and makes changes to the mayor's proposed fiscal year 2024 budget and financial plan. Today's hearing takes on an extra importance to the committee. A few years ago, as some people may recall, this committee, with the assistance of the committee of the whole and my council colleagues, fully funded the Child Wealth Building Act, commonly referred to as the Baby Bonds Program, allocating $32 million across the financial plan for this critically important investment in babies trapped in poverty in the District of Columbia. However, during the fiscal year 2023 and 2024 budget formulation process, the Office of the Chief Financial Officer has acknowledged that it neglected to incorporate the cost of this program into the financial plan. So the costs were missing in the financial plan for fiscal years 26 and 27. When this oversight was identified, neither my office nor the council were notified. And as part of the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget and financial plan, which is now before the council for consideration, the executive made a policy decision to defund the program. Yesterday, I sent a letter to the mayor requesting that she account for the OCFO's error and fund the Child Wealth Building Act for fiscal years 2024 through 2027 in her forthcoming errata letter to the council. With that, we want to make sure that we cover this as one of the topics that we're engaged with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer about this morning when we consider their proposed budget. With that said, we're now going to turn to our public witnesses. I don't think we've had any of my colleagues join me in the hearing just yet. So we're going to turn to the public witnesses who signed up to testify for the Chief Financial Officer's budget. And just as a reminder, public witnesses will have 3 minutes to provide their oral testimony. We encourage all public witnesses to provide their written testimony to the committee via email. Government witnesses will have 7 minutes for any opening statements or presentations, and my colleagues who join will have 3-minute opening statements, as well as 7-minute rounds if they are around for rounds of questions. And all participants should mute their microphones when they're not speaking. At this time, I'm going to call Mary Levy, Renee T., and Erica Williams. Those are the 3 witnesses who signed up to testify with the committee prior to today's hearing. Good morning to each of you. Thanks for joining us here at the committee this morning. We're going to begin with Mary Levy.
Good morning. I'm Mary Levy, and I have studied and analyzed District of Columbia Public School budget for over 40 years. It was quite a shock last year when the mayor's proposed budget was released to see that all intra-district funds had suddenly disappeared from the budgets of all receiving agencies in fiscal 2023, and again, of course, the fiscal 24 budget. The money is only shown in the agencies that receive it in the first place. For example, the Office of State Superintendent of Education, which passes tens of millions of dollars just to the school system, other agencies also. I understand that the data dumps that the council receives specify the totals of some of the grants to the receiving agencies, but not all by any means. And this is not public information in any event. Moreover, and worse, there is no information whatever on how the money will be spent by these agencies. The council does not know any more than does the public. The amounts and uses of federal money should not be a secret. This means there is no accountability for tens of millions of dollars in DCPS alone. That is absolutely appalling. The chief financial officer needs to be called upon to reverse this practice, to rid us of this huge hole in basic financial information. Please do so. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
And thank you for your testimony this morning. Next is Renee T. Good
Yes.
morning. Thanks for joining us. You can begin your testimony.
Great, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? I won't be on cam, but I'll be on mic.
We can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. I think I initially had some oral testimony points I wanted to make out, but I feel like I should scrap it because I think of what the chairman just mentioned about the baby bond program, because the underlying policy there is to give DC residents, especially those in poverty, a chance. And that equity is one of the principles that we all share and one of the values that we share. I think of those baby bond recipients who hopefully one day can also buy a home, maybe even a cooperative unit, but it's something to give them a shot in life and to live up to their full potential. And home ownership is already incredibly difficult, but hopefully it would give them a boost to achieve that. So in my testimony, as I've testified before to the committee, I'm a resident and representative of a nonprofit housing cooperative here in the district. And I've expressed great frustration with the Office of Tax and Revenue, in particular with the Real Property Tax Administration. I do want to begin by positive things to say about OCFO. Among the most efficient central financial operations units, I think the Office of the Finance and the Treasury, when they propose rules on the baby bond program and their administration of the district's 529 program, they're excellent. Office of Revenue Analysis provides issues and reports to the public so everyone is aware of the district finances. But OTR, on the other hand, I have significant concerns about. Most recently, I attended a Twitter chat on cooperatives. They are trying to get the word out, and I applaud them for their attempt, but the manner and how they're spending our taxpayer funds, and it's just not, it wasn't a very well attended event. And I believe I saw the number of attendees peak at around 13. I don't know how many of those were actually OCFO staff members. And if the questions from the community were any indication, they didn't even know what a cooperative was. So the people who needed to see these presentations are not even on Twitter. I've expressed concern also with using DC OTR's, their own data, that people are just not getting their tax benefits that are entitled to them under the law. So I have to ask the committee to question and really scrutinize what Real Property Tax Administration is even doing. And their efforts are just, they might as well just be talking to a wall here. And lastly, I'll mention that I don't have anything to gain. Our housing co-op is compliant. We fill out all the forms, but other district residents don't have an advocate for them. And OTR and our PTA just are creating a bureaucracy that is just not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. Next, and the final witness for public witnesses before we transition to our government witness is Erica Williams with the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. Good morning to you. You can begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson McDuffie and members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Erica Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Fiscal Policy Institute, where we shape racially just tax budget and policy decisions to advance an anti-racist, equitable future. And my testimony today, my oral testimony, will focus on recommendations we have for ensuring that earned income tax credit eligible filers are able to claim their credit. We urge the committee to modify the Budget Support Act language for 2023 to allow EITC filers to opt out of monthly payments of the credit, given that it can put receipt of federal benefits like SNAP at risk. And we also urge the committee to work with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer to ensure that filers unable to receive an individual taxpayer identification number, folks who are newly eligible for the EITC, who may be barred from getting an ITIN because of IRS restrictions, have a way to claim the DC earned income tax credit. I have two other recommendations around baby bonds and around the DC Clean Hands law that I may not get to, but we could talk about. So last year, this committee advanced and the council adopted an amendment act to ensure that those receiving monthly payments of the DC EITC are not at risk of losing DC funded public benefits or federal benefits where DC has the ability to modify eligibility, like TANF. However, the act does not and cannot exempt monthly EITC payments from eligibility and benefit level determinations in other programs. SNAP is one we're most worried about, but WIC, supplemental security income, and also potentially some Medicaid recipients may also be at risk of losing benefits. We ask that the committee work with the general counsel at DHS to determine the full scope of the problem and to ensure taxpayers know what the risks are and what their options are, and also that we add language to the Budget Support Act that requires an opt-out provision on our DC tax form for EITC monthly payments that particularly benefits folks who may be at risk of losing public benefits, but also may benefit other families that could use the lump sum payments to pay for big ticket items like an expensive car repair or to flee an abusive relationship or other needs. We also have found out from states that have implemented an expansion of the EITC to ITIN filers that the IRS does not issue ITINs to folks who don't owe federal taxes or are not eligible for federal refundable tax credits. And that may mean many people newly eligible for our credit won't be able to get an ITIN to claim it in this next tax filing season. And so we ask that this committee work with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer to determine a workaround to ensure that those folks are able to actually claim the credit that we want them to be able to access. And I will stop there, happy to say more.
Thank you each for your testimony this morning. I would like you to say a little bit more, Erica Williams, both finishing any thoughts you had about how this committee could work with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer to address the issues you mentioned around EITC filers. Then also you have a portion of your testimony that talks about restoring funding for baby bonds program, which I'd also like you to touch on.
Yeah, so let me start there. I mean, I think that that you, Chairman McDuffie, and this committee really laudably championed a baby bonds program for the district that had the potential to really substantially support kids from poor and low income families who don't have a lot of opportunities ahead of them, and to do something about the racial wealth gap here in the district, which we know is vast. We also know that the racial wealth gap causes intergenerational harm. Families that have wealth can pay for a good education. They can start a business, take those kinds of entrepreneurial risks. They can live in amenity-rich neighborhoods, weather a job loss, all kinds of things. And families with little or no wealth just don't have those same opportunities or that same kind of freedom or security in life. We even saw in the mayor's own comeback plan that the people-centered policy proposals in that plan called for building economic stability, mobility, and wealth. So we were really disappointed to see that the budget raised the 54.3 million across the financial plan to balance the budget instead of investing in this really transformative program. And so we would like to see the council reverse course on that, of course, and fully restore the recurring funds to the baby bonds program, making sure that we get this thing off the ground and take aim at the racial wealth gap that has plagued the district since its founding. In terms of the EITC, I think the desire to offer monthly payments to EITC filers is very laudable, and we think it's a great way to potentially smooth out family finances. But it may not work for everyone because of federal restrictions around public benefits, where when folks are getting what are considered regular sources of income, that counts towards their eligibility for the program and for the determination of the benefit level. And so, SNAP is a great example. Monthly payment of the EITC, they will count as regular income. And that may mean that while a family is getting our much expanded EITC, they are seeing a reduction in their SNAP benefits. And we want to make sure families are held harmless, that they're getting all the things that they're eligible for. If they get the EITC in a lump sum payment, they do not run the risk of losing SNAP benefits. So that is why we're asking for an opt-out provision on our tax form, so that folks can make the choices that they need to make based on their situation. I think we also need the OCFO and DHS to kind of communicate with each other and figure out how to get people the information they need to make the best choices for their families. So that's what we're asking. On the expansion of the credit to EITC filers who we are now allowing to claim the credit with an ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number. The problem is really that the IRS apparently limits who it issues an ITIN to. And so if you don't owe federal taxes, which many folks who claim the DC ITC won't, and if you aren't eligible for federal refundable credits, which most people without a Social Security number cannot get, you're not eligible for an ITIN. I think that's problematic. We have talked to the Office of Tax and Revenue about whether a DC identification number could be issued. They feel like that is overly complicated. We'd love for them to look into that more, but also to be in touch with the IRS to see if there is a way to work around this rule for DC, since that we have a particular reason for people to apply for an ITIN to claim a local credit. So they have reached out to the National Taxpayer Advocate, I know, but I really think it might move faster. We might gain more ground if this committee were working with them to make sure we have a solution.
Thank you for that. I'll be sure to ask the CFO and his team about this. Just in terms of the EITC and the monthly benefits, your testimony is that there be an opt-out provision in DC's tax form. And just to be clear, folks who might be listening, it's automatically provided monthly to those who are eligible?
It's automatically provided monthly to folks whose credit is large enough. So I believe the cutoff in the first year is $600. So if you have a credit that is over $600, and this is only for families with children, not for single filers whose credit is much smaller, those folks would get a monthly payment in this would automatically get monthly payments in this first year. But after that, and when our credit has expanded and becomes much larger, it's the cutoff, I think, is $1,200. So people would, if you would get less than basically $100 a month over the course of a year, you would get a lump sum. Otherwise, you automatically get monthly payments.
Got it. And just in terms of thinking about this, you all recommend an opt-out rather than an opt-in. Give me some just your insights on why that is and how it probably best benefits those individuals to choose to opt out.
Yeah, I think in the past, when the federal government offered an opt-in provision for periodic payments of the federal EITC, not a lot of people took it up, and that may point to folks not wanting a monthly payment, but it also may mean that they just maybe didn't think through all the benefits. I think the intention behind making sure it was an automatic monthly payment was to help folks smooth out their month-to-month finances so that they're able to pay in a regular way, a stable way for their rent and their, and putting food on the table and all the things that families need. I think we think it's a good idea, but we also want families to have choices. An opt-in may mean less, fewer people choose that option. And opt-out at least gives people the choice. I also think at this point, the OCFO and OTR have kind of set up a system, and we're already in the middle of a tax season right now where people are going to start getting monthly payments automatically. And so, I think the easier course correct at this point is for an opt-out rather than an opt-in.
Okay. And then, and just in terms of your understanding of whether recipients who would receive the monthly payments are informed of the potential to lose certain federal benefits. Are they? Do you get the sense that people understand that? I was on a Zoom yesterday with about 70 seniors, and during the question and answer portion, this came up, and one of the seniors raised this as a serious issue.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's enough information out there. I think that DHS is working with, in our conversation with them, working with the Federal Reserve Bank, I think of Richmond, to develop a sort of model for figuring out where the so-called benefit cliffs are, where people start to lose benefits if they're getting new ones. That might be helpful in figuring things out, but I do think DHS needs to do an assessment of how many folks who are receiving benefits that they're providing would potentially be at risk of losing the value or the benefit in full if they're getting monthly payment at the EITC. I don't think that's been done. We have control over a lot of programs. So like I said, TANF, childcare is another, any DC funded health programs. The problem is really when you're talking about those federal benefit programs where we do not have control. So SNAP, WIC, and for some folks who are eligible for Medicaid because they're seniors or through disability, they may also be at risk, though fewer of those people would likely be eligible for the EITC.
Sure. Thank you for that, and definitely want to get the CFO's reaction to some of your testimony today, and certainly follow up on these issues. We appreciate working with you all when we introduced and got past the Earned Income Tax Credit Expansion Clarification Amendment Act to try to avoid what's happening on the federal level, to prevent it happening of local benefits. So thank you for your work on that. I do want to ask Renee T, you mentioned your OTR concerns, and there was a specific event I think you mentioned where there wasn't, or at least didn't appear to be, much participation via Zoom. Can you tell me what events that was? And
yeah, so I received a communication that OTR does these periodic Twitter chats. So, I mean, even when I look at the number of attendees, and I was very busy that day, so even I had a chance to peek in. it peaked at 13 attendees, but it's a Twitter chat. And a quick gloss at OTR's website is that they do these periodic lunch and learn, so to speak, on Tax Tuesdays, but they hold them on platforms that aren't particularly accessible. Instagram, for example, or in this case, Twitter. You know, when we're talking about senior citizen benefits and like for cooperatives or low income, it's laughable that OTR thinks that this is a way to do outreach. And if the number of attendees and the questions that were asked were any indication, the message is just not getting across, and empirical data proves that. I was able to take data extracts that there are 0 homesteaders in many parts of Ward 7 and 8, which is very questionable and alarming. It suggests to me that OTR is just not reaching its intended audience. And I'm a nonprofit volunteer. I can only imagine like how overwhelmed people elsewhere in the city, those with the most vulnerable and least means, can't even access this, but OTR just shrugs its shoulders and says that, well, we had a Twitter chat.
I got you. And I appreciate you expanding on that. Mary Levy, you raised concerns around the OCFO's office and the DCPS budget. Can you just expound on the concerns and where you think there's an opportunity for this committee to support an effort around transparency?
Well, I have spoken to the chairman about it, and I've spoken to the council's budget office about it. I was told that this is a concern for many agencies. The district has put out budgets for decades that accounted for all of the money that agencies were spending. And all of a sudden, we don't know what's happening to millions of dollars of federal funds. And when it's a secret, there is no way for accountability. The public role, of course, is to bring pressure on the executive and on the council to do something about it. I don't know whose idea this was to leave out all the inter-district funds. I do know that the rationale was they didn't want to double count spending in both the agency that initially gets the money and the agency to which it's transferred and who actually spend the money. But if we could do it for decades without having that problem, I just hope that both this committee and the council chair, because it is a citywide, committee-wide problem, will sit down with the CFO and say, how are you going to get this information to us? All of it, because if it's a problem of the new financial system, all right, that doesn't prevent the CFO from doing appendices, at least, that would tell us where is the money going.
Thank you for that. We'll also ask the CFO's office about this. So we appreciate each of you providing testimony to the committee this morning. I would ask, I think the only one that I got in my preparation who provided written testimony was Erica Williams. If you have the opportunity, I think Renee T, you mentioned that you would provide some additional testimony to what you provided orally this morning. So if again, we just urge you all to provide written testimony if you have the opportunity.
Okay. I sent mine in on Monday.
Okay, I'm not sure why we didn't get it, but we'll check and make sure we have it. So thank you for doing that. And thank you each for testifying this morning.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to transition now to our government witnesses, Glenn Lee, the Chief Financial Officer of the District of Columbia, and his team. And we're going to swear you all in, as is the new policy here at the committee. Whenever you all are ready, raise your hands. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia in this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you each. You can have a seat. Before you all get going, let me just mention for the public's benefit that the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, or OCFO, is an independent agency whose mission is to ensure the fiscal and financial stability, accountability, and integrity of the government of the District of Columbia. The OCFO provides oversight and direct supervision of financial and budget functions of the District of Columbia. Among other functions, the OCFO prepares the district's annual budget proposal and monitors budget performance during the fiscal year. The OCFO's proposed fiscal year 2024 operating budget is approximately $224.8 million, which represents a 2.5% decrease from the fiscal year 2023 approved operating budget. The OCFO's proposed capital budget for fiscal year 2024 notably is zero, which represents a 100% decrease from the approved fiscal year 2023 budget. Now I'm going to turn it over to Glenn Lee, our Chief Financial Officer, to provide testimony. Good morning to each of you. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
Mr. Lee, begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am Glenn Lee, Chief Financial Officer of the District of Columbia. I am pleased to appear before you today to discuss the fiscal year 2024 budget request for the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, or as we say, OCFO. The OCFO's fiscal year 2024 budget request supports the mission and functions of our agency that you articulated. I will now present in a PowerPoint presentation our budget in greater detail. All right, first page, please. As you mentioned, we have many financial responsibilities. From my perspective, the marquee responsibilities are to estimate our revenues, certify budgets as being balanced, and report on city's financial affairs, monitor spending and revenue, and then also evaluate legislation as it's being processed. But in addition to that, we have many financial, transactional, or process responsibilities that are substantive. Probably the most notable is we oversee the levy and collection of taxes. We oversee the lottery. We also manage debt and investment and our investments for the district, other than the retirement board's responsibilities. And we process and record transactions throughout the agencies. So we have a complete responsibility for the financial operation of the district. Next slide, please. There's a handful of data points that I think are helpful. The first, this slide here points mainly to our tax administration responsibilities. We process 1.2 million returns each year. We have about 330,000 tax refunds that are processed, and we provide property tax assessments for nearly 210,000 properties across the district. Next slide, please. Beyond our tax levying and collection responsibilities, as I mentioned, we have dozens and dozens of financial processing responsibilities, and this highlights many of those. We process over 3.5 million either wire or ACH transactions or financial transactions in a variety of channels. We have debt collection operation that's collected for the non-tax debt, 34 million, roughly 35 million a year. Our total outstanding debt, this is general obligation debt, is over $12 billion. And we execute annual sales of anywhere from 800 million to a couple $1 billion a year, depending on capital needs and refunding opportunities. In addition, we manage many of the city's trusts, or the district's trusts, about $5 billion worth of resources tied up in those trusts, and we ensure their safety and solid returns. We process roughly 1 million payroll payments each year. And we do about 150 fiscal assessments, fiscal impact statements or assessments across many different topics. And most importantly, from my perspective, and it's not on the sheet, is that we've had our 26th consecutive year of a clean audit with fiscal year 2022. And I think that speaks most highly of not only our operation, but also the elected officials of the district over the last 2 decades in their fiscal stewardship. So I'm very proud of them. Next slide, please. As you know, we're implementing a new financial system. One of the presenters earlier referred to that. If you recall, in our performance hearing discussion, the point of implementing a new system, well, the new system would cover accounting, budget management, and financial reporting. It also deals with payment processing and budget development. We're moving from a data warehouse environment to a cloud environment and replacing our existing SOAR and budget formulation application, or BFA. There are many, many important reasons for doing this. One of the most important is that SOAR was long since obsolete. It was a system implemented around the year 2000. And so its fundamental architecture and processing is out of date, and also was relatively unstable over time. It took an enormous amount of work to keep our books together. With a new system, that doesn't happen. The system went live in October, and our plan was and is for a new budget system to go live in October of 2023. That's the background of DIFS. Implementing a financial system like this is extremely difficult. I've done this before in another jurisdiction. I'm pleased to say that we are making progress in stabilizing transactions relative to the issues we were having early on, which are not terribly unusual. We are having, in general, far more processing executed as we expect, and we're very pleased with that. Clearly, not everything works exactly the way we want. So this is implementation is an ongoing process. The reality is we're not fully implemented until the financial audit is completed on our first fiscal year, which that audit will be done, of course, in February and March. And so we still have a long way to go to stabilize the system, a long way to go to say that we're fully implemented. And that's not a surprise. That's how these things go. To date, DIFS, the financial system, which the acronym is DIFS, has successfully processed over 102,000 payments, totaling $6.3 billion. The vast majority of payments are being processed accurately and on time. Most importantly, we have far more sophisticated systems to see when there's small issues, and believe me, they're far smaller than they were a few months ago, so that we're proactively addressing problems before they become an issue to vendors or our clients across the district. One example of an improvement, the system that we set up in DIFS to manage expense reimbursements was really cumbersome and not terribly well designed. We have redesigned that and are currently implementing a far more streamlined process that we believe our customers will be very pleased with, but also ensure that we maintain the proper internal controls over those transactions. So again, that's not unusual. Once you start using the system, you make adjustments. We're in that mode right now, and will be, at least through fiscal year 2024.
Uh, Mr. Lee,
Yes.
my plan was to let you finish, but I just want to make sure I heard, which aspects of the system did you all make some tweaks to?
Expense reimbursement
Oh, got it. Okay,
for
thanks.
employees. What we set up was clearly too cumbersome. We've streamlined it and yet maintain our internal controls. So we're very pleased with that. But that's an example of the adjustments that you have to make when you're implementing a new system. While we continue to monitor these processes daily, our focus now really is understanding how we need to prepare to compile data for the year-end reporting that we have to do. And so we are, many of our accountants are now switching over to looking at mock year-end processes to ensure that effectively all the dollars add up correctly. Now, we have no reason to think they're not, but it's good to go through this process a couple times before year-end so we can find where we need to make adjustments to the transactions, or more importantly, how we compile the transactions. And so we that's my focus, quite honestly. I want to make sure that our year-end is as smooth as possible. Having been through a process before in another jurisdiction where year-end went poorly because we did not do these steps, I'm pleased that the staff has put together a good plan to evaluate our year-end processes. So let's talk about our budget. Next slide, please. As you mentioned, our budget is roughly $225 million for fiscal year 2024, and that supports a little over 1,000 FTEs, 1,065 to be precise. Roughly 60% of our budget goes on personal service expenses. That's payroll-related expenses, so our people, and about 40% go to non-personnel services. But that there's a couple of categories of expenses and non-personal services that are important to point out from my perspective. First is that roughly 35 million of our 93 million here for non-personal services is for licenses and contract support for our many IT systems. As you know, we run not only the financial system I discussed, but a tax system and many others, and that's a lot of money and commitment. In addition, roughly $27 million, almost 30 million, goes to our support for our collection activities, both for delinquent taxes and delinquent other payments. And so when you adjust for those two large outlays, really our budget is more 80% people and 20% non-personnel expenses. And that reflects the fact that we're mainly an office people supported operation. Next slide, please. The resources that are supporting us consist of the following. First, 172, almost 173 million from local funds, just under 900,000 for federal grants, and then $51 million for special purpose revenues, or of special purpose revenues. And that is mainly issues associated with the tax collection and delinquency contracts that we have and resources that support those, as well as roughly $5.5 million for a variety of banking fees that we use our budget to pay. Next slide, please. So highlights of the fiscal year 24 budget as proposed from the mayor. First, there's some local government increases. The first three items are reflect different revenue initiatives that result in our estimate of $11 million in local revenue money for fiscal year 2024, and then $5 million in additional resources thereafter annually, roughly. The fourth point there is a shift of resources from the district's central IT group to our IT group. We look forward to working with them to ensure that we pick up the additional responsibilities that are inherent with this adjustment. So, but then we also, as you pointed out, decreased our budget, or we had reductions that we had to address. First is that we reduced our budget was reduced by $2.5 million, primarily to have to reflect a larger vacancy rate. With this budget, we now will budget around and plan for a 10% vacancy rate. What that means is we have to hold a 1 out of 10 jobs vacant in order to balance our budget. And of all organizations, we will do that. But at that point in time, with that kind of vacancy rate, that takes very proactive actions to make sure that we have the right resources supporting our program areas. So while we're not reducing positions, in effect, this is a position reduction that we have to manage. And many other agencies will probably be in that situation. We can talk more about our employment situation moving forward later in the discussion. In addition, we are receiving less ARPA resources, so that results in a reduction in our budget. We have a series of expenses that are net new to us that we were not funded for, so we have to absorb these within our budget. First and most importantly, to support the new financial system, we're creating a help center and a support center for accounting activities and people who interface with our financial system. And we need to expand that by 13 FTEs, or roughly $3.6 million. We will reorganize our budget in order to absorb that. There were other net new expenses that we are facing that we were not supported with the proposed budget. First is basically a series of licenses that we have to pay for with the new system that are roughly $2.9 million. We have no choice. We have to pay these expenses in order to operate the system. There are similar expenses associated with our other systems, non-financial systems like the tax system and whatnot, that are additional $1.2 million. And the banking expenses that I described before, which are roughly $5.5 million in our base budget, we actually have nearly a $900,000 increase next year that was not funded. So we have to find ways to deal with these within our existing budget that, as we point out, has been reduced. So you made a point to describe that we had no capital funding, and a policy decision that was made by the mayor's office for the 2024 budget was to not support or not provide funding for implementing the budget system component of our financial system. Looking back at the notes, when you first agreed to pay for the whole financial system, there was $15 million allocated for the budget component, implementing the budget component. I believe it was a couple fiscal years ago to help with balancing. We agreed to take that out of our budget in order to pay for other capital expenses at the time, with the notion that we would then receive this $15 million in 2024 to pay for the budget component. The mayor's budget chooses not to do that. So while we still need a new budget system in place in October of 2023, we will now have to address that without the resources that were originally agreed to pay for that. Now we're looking at several options right now on how to do this. We will have a product together, but it certainly won't reflect what was intended even 3 or 4 months ago. And with that, I will, my team and I will be happy to answer any questions you have, sir.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Lee. I do have some questions.
Yes, sir.
And before I get into my prepared questions or the questions I have based on the presentation you just provided to the committee, I want to get your reaction on some of the testimony we received from public witnesses. You weren't here. I'm not sure if you were listening someplace else. Your team was here, but we have 3 public witnesses who testified this morning. And Let's begin with Mary Levy. She testified about budget transparency, some of the information that had previously, in previous years, been provided as a matter of course when the budget is produced for the DC Public Schools. She talked about the inter-district funds. She mentioned some conversation that she's had with the committee of the whole, and she implored this committee to work with the committee of the whole and the chairman and to push your office to provide certain information that had previously, in her understanding, been provided based on just, I guess, like I said earlier, as a matter of course. Are you familiar with this concern that she raised? Did you hear it? And do you have a reaction to the concerns?
I did hear parts of the comments, and I can speculate what she's referring to, but I want to be cautious that it's just speculation. I've not heard from her directly, nor as far as I know, my staff.
And we have a written testimony, which we'll make sure that we
Perfect.
provide, the staff will provide to your team.
There was a policy choice made when our new financial system was being designed and implemented that resulted in expenses for services that certain departments pay from other departments to generate. So in other words, rent for a building, fuel, that the budget and expense only be displayed in the department that's buying the service, not the budget or the department that was providing the service. So my understanding is that over the years, we showed that expense in two places. And that is a common correction or adjustment that's made when new financial systems are put in. That entire mechanism is rethought so that we only show expenses once. So in general, whoever is purchasing the services, whatever that's DCPS or NPD, those expenses are now exclusively in their budget and are not displayed in the provider's budget. Now, that's a general concept, again, without understanding specifically her issues. I don't want to comment beyond that.
Right.
I hope you appreciate that, but we in the industry, in the public finance industry, feel that the double presentation of those types of expenses are confusing and difficult to manage, that it's far more efficient just to show the budgeting and expenses where the final product is provided. In addition, it makes it very clear the full cost of those services. So the fuel example, having all fuel expenses, and I hope this is a good example, in the police department rather than in a general services department shows why we're buying fuel. It's for the police vehicles. That's the concept. Again, I can't speak to her specific concerns, but would be happy to come back with more detail if you'd like to understand how this.
Sure, yeah, we'll make sure we get you her testimony, and I've already asked my team to reach out to the committee of the whole. I'm assuming that they may already be familiar with concerns she's raised, perhaps in testimony before the committee of the whole, but we're happy to follow up. So we appreciate the example you just provided in your response. Renee T, with the nonprofit housing cooperative, mentioned concerns with OTR. I think it's important to also mention that he complimented other divisions of the Office of Chief Financial Officer as well. He mentioned an event, or at least a series of events, I think, that OTR does on Twitter. And I've seen the tweets for, and I'm blanking on the name of it. My staff just pulls it up, but I've seen tweets where they invite people to certain informational sessions and the like. In essence, the concern was that by doing it on Twitter or Instagram or some other aspect of social media, you're not reaching your intended targets and the folks who might benefit from receiving the information. Have you given thought to that in the past? What's your response to that critique?
Yeah. So my philosophy is, especially in the tax administration area, is that we should empower our staffs to use any and all communication channels to reach all components of taxpaying community. And I encourage a robust use of the different social media channels that you would never think of doing 10 years ago as a tax administrator. I can't speak to the individual experience of this presenter, but in general, I think it's essential that we use every single channel that we can use to provide information to taxpayers about their responsibilities. Then it's a matter of style. Are we as complete in different channels as we are in others? We try to be. But I respect his comments. I'm just saying my philosophy is that we empower our staff to use every channel we can, any means we can to communicate.
Well, I understand that, and I similarly empower my staff to do that. I guess the follow-up would be a more open-ended question is what tools and avenues of communication does the Office of Tax and Revenue employ to invite people to participate in these types of conversations and events? This is one that I see here was Tax Tuesday. Join the conversation and learn more about the real property cooperative community tax benefits. They give the date, Tuesday, March 28th, 12 p.m. and they give a Twitter handle. Now, if the only means of promoting that event and inviting people to participate is Twitter and Instagram, I would have concerns. But perhaps if you could share now or in follow-up what other means the Office of Tax and Revenue uses to try to invite people to participate, and maybe even share what the level of participation has been for these events. It might be helpful to shed additional light on what the engagement actually looks like.
I'd like to follow up because I think to properly answer your question, you have to provide the same what you're asking for. What has been our experience with different channels in terms of who utilizes and who participates. So I'd far rather follow up with that.
Okay.
To provide a complete answer.
I had a couple of questions about, before I go to your slide presentation, let me start with my prepared questions. Let me note for the record that we've been joined by Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker, and we're going to do 7-minute rounds. And staff, if y'all can just make sure we're monitoring Zoom in case any other members join. I want to start with my prepared questions by clearing something up with respect to the Child Wealth Building Act and the mayor's fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. You and your staff have met with me and my team a couple of times now, and I appreciate your responsiveness to our request to meet about what happened to this program, and that the council, be clear, the council fully funded in the fiscal year 2022 budget this program. I want to summarize my understanding and get your response. The council funded in full this law in its fiscal year 2022 budget and financial plan. During the FY23 budget formulation process, the CFO inadvertently, the old CFO inadvertently neglected to incorporate the cost of this program into the financial plan. In the fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year 2024 budget and financial plans, the costs were left out of the financial plan for years fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027. No one in the council was informed of this issue at any point before the presentation of the mayor's fiscal year 2024 budget to the council. The mayor made, so after this error was made by the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, essentially accounting error, which happens every now and again, there was subsequently a policy decision by the mayor and her team to defund the program in the FY 2024 proposed budget, in which she swept the fiscal years 2024 and 2025 funds. Is that summary accurate?
I believe, can I restate
Sure.
this just so that I understand? So yes, in the fiscal year, first, I'd like to describe back to when the bill was considered and adopted. Just want to be really clear, our financial impact statement was explicitly clear that this was a ongoing program that had increasing costs over time, and I know you all spoke about that. So make no mistake, certainly within our organization, and I would argue throughout the district government, there was a full understanding that this is a multi-year program.
I would agree with that.
Okay. And then in addition, in the fiscal year 23 adopted budget and financial plan, that there was a technical mistake for the 26th or the last year of the financial plan. And
Mistake by whom? What office, what agency?
well, we formulate the budget. I'll end it there. Clearly, we have partners both with the mayor's staff and council staff that are intimate with the budget, as you know. And collectively, we did not see our omission.
Let me stop you, Mr. Lee. This is what I want to try to avoid, though. Did the council make, in your estimates, did the council make a mistake
No,
in the budget?
No,
Okay.
no,
Did the mayor make a
wanna-
mistake in the budget?
I want to be really clear that
Okay.
we omitted it. There was a
Okay.
technical
All right.
mistake that we made.
Okay.
Other eyes on that were on that, but I'm not holding them accountable. I'm just telling you that, there's more than just us look at the
Got it.
detail. So to correct the omission, which is a concern for me, being new to this process, I've asked our budget staff to look at processes, enhancements to our processes for what we would call relatively unusual programs that are rapidly expanding like this was. So for a baseline expense that grows basically with inflation or labor contracts, we use certain processes to formulate the budget. When we have a net new program, as this was, that's growing rapidly, there are other processes that are very manually intensive. That's where our mistake occurred.
Okay.
So we're rebuilding that process with verifications of both the mayor's staff and council, along with our staff, to ensure that this mistake doesn't happen again.
I fully appreciate that.
So you have my commitment that we're going to fix that. But as you point out, that's a very different matter than the policy decision to not fund this program. It was clearly understood this is a multi-year program. As you point out in the proposed budget, not only was 26 and now the new year, 27 not funded, but also the resources committed in 24 and 25 were eliminated.
So just
those
to-
were policy choices.
Just to recap, technical mistake, error, whatever you want to call it, made by the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. That was at some point recognized by the executive, and then a policy decision was made by the executive to remove funds in the budget that were allocated in the budget by the council and by law.
I want to be very careful here. I'm not in their office, so I don't know what they recognized what, but there's no doubt a policy decision was made to,
By whom?
well, by the mayor's office,
Okay.
because they decide what the budget will contain. That did not fund 26 and 27, but moreover, eliminated funding in 24 and 25.
Eliminate fund in 24, 25. So my final piece of this, if the technical error by the OCFO meant that there were no funds for 26 and 27, how then does the mayor get credit in her budget that she's proposed where she swept funds for those fiscal years if there were no funds there? I'm trying to reconcile the mistake, the technical mistake,
Sure.
and then the subsequent policy decision to sweep funds in 24 and 25. Are those the only funds she swept, or does she get credit and also sweep funds in the out years of the financial plan?
Right. So if she chose to support the program, she would have had additional expenses in 26 and 27.
Of approximately how much?
10 to 15 million. a
Okay.
year, I believe, and we'll check on.
Per
that. I'm
fiscal
sorry, it's consistent to
Sure.
our financial impact statement. So those were expenses she chose not to face.
Mhm.
And then reallocated the resources in the 24 and 25 fiscal years to other program areas.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I
It
wanna
does,
make
but,
sure
but the additional expenses in 26 and 27, were those recognized as funds that she could otherwise reallocate throughout the budget?
Well, as with any program, one could choose not to fund those and reallocate those to other priorities.
Right, I just wanted to
And
clear that
so
up.
that's in effect what happened.
Okay. All right, I'm over my time. I want to turn to Councilmember Parker for a round.
Thank you, Chair McDuffie. And I just would add that I too am concerned by the mistake, which seems curious, and the change in narrative from the previous hearing we had to today, and the consequence that this fully funded legislation is now not in the budget. And now what my colleague has to do is to try to find that money. And so to me, and I'm new to this, it just seems as though there should be some recourse, and I hope that your office, sir, can work alongside with us. And I'll stop there, but it is concerning, and this doesn't seem to be an isolated incident, as I've mentioned before. I want to go through a few things, and then I want to mainly jump into the fiscal impact statements that support some of the budget amendments that were proposed in the mayor's budget. But the first, my office reached out because we have a resident that had been having issues with getting communication from your office. She was based on a court's decision, wrongly terminated. And your office had to issue back pay or rectify a back pay. What was submitted to the Social Security's office was wrong. And as a result, her social security payments monthly have been much lower than they otherwise should be. I appreciate Mr. McNeil for your response to our office, but that resident was having a hard time getting a response to the office. So my first question is, can you just speak to the policy of the CFO's office in engaging residents who may have issues with social security payments? What is your policy? Should they receive a communication, and who should be the point of contact for that?
Well, when we receive requests related to employment with the district, and I believe that's
Yes, yes.
those are responded to by our payroll management team. And I believe you mentioned the gentleman who manages that team. And so payroll can be very complicated based on
Yes.
different kinds of employment patterns an individual may have.
And so what's concerning here in this situation, we have a senior who is living on Social Security, who is getting a fraction of what they otherwise should get for years. And this has been going on since, I believe, 2019. I would acknowledge that Mr. McNeil, that resident, gave him compliments how responsive he was. But then they said, as of a year or so ago, all communication stopped from the office. And so again, what I'm hearing you say is that they should be getting response from the office. Yes?
They should.
Yes,
Now,
okay.
an individual may not agree with that response, but they
Well,
should.
this resident is saying there has been, and we have the email documentation to show over 20 emails that were sent to the office trying to rectify this issue, and there was no communication. Second thing I want to just ask is, what type of audit system do you all have in place to ensure the quality and accuracy of reporting to the Social Security's office so that incidents like this doesn't happen? Because what appeared to happen, the years that in question while this resident was in court with the district, there were zeros entered for their salary once a judgment was entered, that is what they're trying to rectify. And it's been a huge headache, as I can imagine, someone trying to put food on the table, pay their mortgage. And it just begs to question whether or not this is an isolated incident. So can you just speak to what quality control system you have in place to ensure reporting is accurate?
We are very fortunate to have our own quality control audit investigation team. And we conduct systematically several audits a year of our own operations across our jurisdictions, from treasury transactions to many kinds of accounting transactions like payroll, and certainly on the tax side as well. That's very important.
Okay.
And-
And is
and-
that information available?
Our audit findings?
Yes.
I think in general, they're all publicly
Okay.
foyable, so they're all publicly available.
Okay,
Yes.
I will have my team follow up on that, just because this is really concerning. I will say Mr. McNeil, once we reached out, did respond, and it seems as though there is some action taking place. But I can only imagine the headache that this neighbor has had to go through with reaching out over 20 times and not getting a response. So I want to go to another issue, and I will acknowledge, I'm not steeped in this, but it has been raised as a concern of how I'm going to put a reallocation of local investments in banks here in the DC area to other banking institutions outside of DC. Can you speak to why the decision was made to move millions of dollars outside of DC banks to others? And why we should not be concerned about that?
We constantly look at our investment portfolio to ensure it's reaching its expected rates of return and also secure. Currently, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a heightened concern because of instability in the banking sector. And a couple of banks actually have been shut down. So our team is evaluating all our relationships, all our investments in banks, not only locally, but throughout the country, to ensure that we're comfortable with the risk profile of our investments. And I can't speak to any particular decision, but I think appropriately we're closely evaluating all of our relationships with banks, with our investments, with the new realities that are presented to not only us, but everyone else who has to invest resources in it for short-term
I'm running out
purposes.
of time. I will try and pick this up on the second round, but I would just say it is concerning that homegrown banks, including I don't want to call out any specific banks, but homegrown banks, that we would be undercutting them in a way based on concern from your office without more justification, research, and due diligence. So I'll pick it up. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. I had started getting a reaction on some of the testimony from the three public witnesses who testified earlier today. I did ask about two. I wanted to round it out by asking about Erica Williams' testimony. She's the executive director with the DC Fiscal Policy Institute, and she raised some concerns about EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit filers, and an ability for them to be able to opt out of monthly payments of the EITC. And again, I think you may be familiar with that testimony, the concern that's been raised, but I wanted to get your response to some of the concerns. Are you familiar with it? Is your office engaged in any conversations about it? Have you made any decisions around it? Just what are your thoughts?
No decisions. I, in general, appreciate the work that Ms. Williams does, and I know she's engaged with our staff. If there is a policy concern such that we want to make this adjustment, we are happy to look into the feasibility of doing this. That's our responsibility. If it's a policy that you're supportive of, I can't speak from here that at this moment in time, that it's something, a matter of just putting another box on a piece of paper, right? It's never that simple, but if my response to your point is that if that is a policy issue you're interested in, and specifically how we deliver the EITC credit, we're happy to evaluate that
Okay.
and give you a sense of what it'll take and so forth.
Okay, she also raised concerns still along those lines and asked that the council ensure that EITC filers who cannot obtain an I-10 can access the credit. She mentions in her testimony, I'll just read it, that DCFPI has learned since from other states that the IRS has a policy to not issue I-10s to individuals who don't have federal tax liability or aren't otherwise eligible for refundable federal tax credits. That can mean that many DC workers newly eligible for the DC credit who don't already have an I-10 will be unable to claim it next tax filing season. Is that something that you all are familiar with or engage in conversations around? Or not
Our
so
staff
much?
may have engaged in or may be aware of this nuance. I can't speak to it now.
Okay, all right, we'll follow up.
But
I just wanted to put it on the
we're
record.
happy, yeah.
Okay. I left off earlier just talking about the Child Wealth Building Act, and I appreciate my colleague concerns. And you know, I've expressed these in our meetings, but want to assure the public that I am committed to trying to rectify the issue. We funded this Child Wealth Building Act, the baby bonds bill, with $32 million a couple of years ago. It now appears, because of the growth that you mentioned earlier, it's a $54 million budget gap that needs to be filled. So definitely am committed to working to rectify this, and have already asked for your insights and commitment to also assisting with that. I want to talk now about racial equity. Can you identify any program or allocation funded in the OCFO's proposed budget for fiscal year 2024 that is specifically designed to address racial or economic inequity, and explain in detail how the program or allocation addresses those inequities?
Inherent in our outreach to the community for community activity that we have, certainly in the tax realm, that has to be a first and foremost concern. In addition, it is part of our thought process with our hiring patterns. They are hiring decisions as well. It's an important component to reflect our community. And so I think how we relate to the public and also how we conduct our personnel management policies are important components of appropriate oversight over race and social justice matters.
What about any decisions that you all make in terms of the authority that you have? I think one example that I've raised and we've talked about in the past, and frankly, my colleague, Mr. Parker, just mentioned, is around deposits. It's around, you know, where the district's money is held. It's about, you know, contracting with minority fund managers. It's a host of those things. Have you all given further consideration to any of those things? And are there any specific examples that you all can cite as to the office's engagement of minority contractors, you know, MDIs, minority depository institutions, CDFIs, any examples that you can cite that speak to the CFOs, the OCFOs' commitment to addressing equity issues?
I'd like our administrative executive director to answer the question.
Sure. If you could just make sure you state your name for the record.
Sure. Paul Lundquist, Director of Management and Administration for OCFO. Good morning, Chair McDuffie and Councilmember Parker. I can only say as a general rule, we certainly are committed to following the letter of the law regarding CBE participation, but also the spirit of that law. And we have consistently exceeded our CBE spend targets. But as far as the specifics regarding the banking contracts and fund managers, we would have to get you more information about that.
So let me respond to that. There's really two parts of your question. First is what Mr. Lundquist described. How do we conduct ourselves with who we contract with, who we hire, and so forth. The other is the notion of deposits, and this is an interesting tension that exists certainly with every public retirement board across the country, as well as investments of cash flow reserves, which is what we're talking about here. We have, especially here at the OCFO, very specific fiduciary responsibilities in federal law, and our as does the board trustees over the retirement system, and that really make particular kinds of investments to benefit a local economy or benefit other policy objectives, frankly, not possible. And I've served on retirement boards for years, and a lot of this started with concerns over environmental effects of some investments, but certainly other situations where investment managers were asked to invest in local economies disproportionately to national markets. We have a fiduciary responsibility that's been well litigated and described in federal law that really prevents overtly doing that kind of thing. And so appreciate that how we decide to manage our cash is based on security of the asset and then return, and also the availability to pay our bills when we need to. And really nothing else can be considered. All things being equal, if we see investment opportunities that may further a policy, but have otherwise exactly the same risk profile and whatnot, perhaps that can be considered. But if we're challenged, we have in court, that's a tough bar to jump over.
This
So
actually might just be the topic of a roundtable or some other council oversight.
Right.
Because I appreciate the fiduciary responsibility that you all have, and frankly have explored that both with your predecessor as well as with the members of the retirement board. And I've actually legislated in this area, but have been limited by our charter and your fiduciary responsibility. And so, but I do think that what I don't want, I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but what I don't want is for your office or the retirement board or any other agency that manages district government money, tax dollars, or pension funds to hide behind a fiduciary responsibility if in fact there are ways to make those investments and have a similar return, right? So I get the fiduciary responsibility and frankly, I understand it well, but I also think sometimes it's just the usual way of doing business that people have gotten used to. And we want to address that because that perpetuates, that sort of way of thinking perpetuates existing systemic inequities. And what I appreciate about you is you have a background in dealing with some of these equity issues where you come from, and I'm well over my time. So I'm going to stop here. But I wanted to make sure I conveyed the need for people to be thoughtful, innovative, recognize existing inequities and the pattern of systemic inequities that have contributed to the existing huge disparities that we see in wealth in every measure of success. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say that. And I know you all are challenged by some of the things that are associated with fiduciary responsibilities, but I think there are ways to think about what you could do while protecting and adhering to your fiduciary responsibility, but not always defaulting to the national investments and national banks and other financial institutions. So my apologies for going well over my time, Councilmember
No
Parker.
need to
Your round.
apologize. I associate myself with all of those comments. And if you saw me, I was shaking my head in agreement with much of it. I want to just pick up there. How much money are we talking about that was reallocated outside of the district?
I wouldn't know that. I don't know.
So the money that we're
Because
hearing.
I don't know what
that-
institutions you're speaking about. So we don't track specifically. I certainly don't track at that level.
So these cash flow reserves that were
Mhm.
invested in local banks, and by local, let's use that liberally, banks in the DMV area. There is no way that your office tracks how much money is in local banks.
We know where I'm saying I don't track that. I look at higher level, what are the categories of investments we
Is there
have?
someone in your
Sure,
office that tracks that?
absolutely, absolutely. And
who-
I have to be careful because sometimes the actual ownership of institutions is not as local as you think. So
Understood.
um,
Who in your office would track that?
our treasurer.
Okay. Is it possible to ask the treasurer in the next 10 minutes to come up with a figure? I'm trying to get a sense of the scale of how much money we're talking about. Is it 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, 200 million?
Yeah, I don't know whether they can do that in 10 minutes. We'd be happy to respond in writing our changes in our investment portfolio that we've made over the last time period, you name it. We can do
Okay,
that.
so as a request, if someone from your
Yes.
office could share in writing how much money and cash flow reserves and other investments in district banks
Yes,
that has been moved outside of district banks in, let's say, the last year, but more recently is the concern I'm hearing from folk on the ground. Who approves that decision in your office?
our treasurer.
The treasurer.
And then she has a large staff underneath her that manage the portfolio as you would expect on a daily basis.
So you have no say in that.
I've delegated that to the treasurer.
And so the treasurer single-handedly can decide, we're going to move $100 million from these DC area banks, and we're going to move it to this bank in Nevada, for instance.
Well,
I'm using that as a hypothetical, but the treasurer single-handedly can make that decision, is what you're saying.
that is her responsibility, and that my expectation is that it's done in a fiduciarily sound way to meet our investment goals. So yes, that's a responsibility, just as the tax administrator has large responsibilities to
So
make decisions.
You're
about
saying
income
you don't
tax.
know the amount of money that has been moved outside of the district. You're saying you don't.
Not right now. We
You
can
don't
provide
have
the answer.
offhand. And so we're talking about many millions of dollars that is moving. To my colleague's point, that could have negative impacts to local banks and our local economy, I would argue. That to me strikes me as odd that you wouldn't have a greater grasp and a pulse of what is happening there. And then I just would ask a more theoretical question. Can you just opine on what might be the impact of, let's say, an industrial bank, for instance, industrial bank, the districts, if I'm not mistaken, only Black bank. If the CFO's office says, we're going to move $30 million outside of your bank, and we're going to put it over here in Goldman Sachs. Again, hypothetically speaking, I'm not sure that's what happened, but what type of negative impact could that have on a local homegrown bank like an industrial bank?
Depends on their capitalization and depends on their loan portfolio. I don't believe there's a single answer. It depends on the structure of both the assets and liabilities of a bank or
Yeah.
any institution.
I mean, to me, it seems as though it could have a significant impact and negatively position locally homegrown banks against others. And that is the equity piece that I believe my colleague was speaking to. So I look forward to receiving that information. I would love to know how much money we're talking about is moving outside of district banks. And I think district residents need to know that your office is single-handedly making the decision to disadvantage local banks at the expense of moving money elsewhere. And to me, it seems odd that we have delegated that responsibility to the treasurer in your office when it can have such negative impacts otherwise. I'm going to use my remaining time to talk about some of the fiscal impact statements associated with the budget amendments that were sent over. And there are several. I want to start here. There is a proposal for downtown tax abatements with the development there. I, as well as many of my colleagues, are persuaded that we do need to do work downtown in order to rebuild. But I have not seen anyone show with hard numbers why developers need these tax abatements. Based on your fiscal impact and your understanding of the situation, can you just walk me through the need for the tax abatements for the development in downtown DC that's being proposed?
I think that's a policy decision. Need is in the sense of the policy that the mayor's team believes it provides the appropriate incentives for some of the use conversions, rehabilitation that her policies are driving toward.
Okay. So I will take you at that's a policy question. So when I was talking with the DDOT director at Monday's hearing, he was unable to explain why approximately $4 million in camera revenue or ATE revenue was not deposited into the Vision Zero fund over the last 2 years, and said that would be a question for your office. Can you explain? Why would ATE revenue not be deposited into the Vision Zero fund over the last 2 years?
My understanding is it has been, so we will evaluate whether that has not, based on your question.
Based on our budget books, it has not, and it is not. And it seems as though there's some discrepancy there. So if you could follow up on that as well, that would be greatly appreciated. I have 5 seconds. I have more questions, but I'm gonna not try and run over. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Lee, the Office of Revenue Analysis forecast revenue for the district on a quarterly basis. The February revenue estimate dramatically revised, actually lowered the revenue forecast for fiscal years 2024 through 2026 from the prior estimates. If you could talk a little bit about what you all saw that caused the downward revision and whether we should expect more volatility in future forecasts.
Roughly, there's 2 phenomena that are happening. First is the impact from the Federal Reserve raising interest rates is slowing economic activity as intended. That's in order to address the inflation pressures on our economy. Not only our own observations, but those of the firms we contract with to provide national and regional economic forecasts, we're seeing evidence of the slowdown, especially in the real estate area where, because mortgages now are much more expensive. So as a result, a consensus of forecasters across the country are reducing their expectations moving forward of the local economy and regional economy, as well as the national economy. So that's number one, is the actions by the Federal Reserve. Number two is we're now seeing the evidence more clearly of the impact of working from home and the lack of commuters coming into downtown in the property area, so in property taxes. So we're seeing fewer transactions of larger commercial buildings, and that revenue stream was down tremendously, as well as we have a better understanding of the impact on assessed values, and assessed values in certain commercial areas are going down. We expect it to peak to trough to lose 15% or so of assessed value. So those are the two issues. The first, the underlying national trends resulting from the Fed's actions, and then second, the the implications of fewer workers coming into downtown and what that means to the property market.
And speaking of what it means to properties, particularly commercial offices, and the impact on our revenues, I think you all started to receive the real property tax payments in March. Are you all seeing any early trends in what those payments look like? Have you gotten a chance to start to look at that?
Yeah, they're generally consistent to our expectations, and I believe we're providing a written response to this effect based on our first budget hearing. But the loss in commercial property value it will result in how do I say this? So if our revenues, if our assessed values would have remained constant over the planning horizon, 24 through 27, relative to the peak in 2022, you'd have no growth. In fact, we are losing up to $200 million a year in local fund revenue as a result of the decline in commercial values.
Okay.
That's our estimate.
All right.
And it's based on our assessment process that, of course, is a year delayed. So we know precisely what we'll collect, not only this year, but next year.
Yeah,
And so that's a real implication on the revenue stream.
And you've talked about this in the past, but I think you've mentioned that there's a lag between when the real property market values adjust and when the real property tax assessments sort of catch up. Can you talk about just what the implications of that are? And I think some people, probably more so on the residential side of things, seem to get a little sticker shock sometimes when they get their assessments because they're looking at the market and they take issue with the amount. Residential might be a bad example. I really want to speak more to the commercial side, but the lag in the values and the assessments. Can you talk about that?
Well, in general, the assessments that are published that we determine affect not the current fiscal year, but the next fiscal year. So inherently there is that lag, but that's in the system. That is a legal foundation for assessments and property taxes. I think on the commercial side, when you have a rapidly changing economic phenomena, which is clearly happening, both either going up or going down, that lag then leads to the assessed values not reflecting where we are at this given moment. And I would argue that happens on both sides. During the boom, let's say 5-6 years ago, values are probably going up far faster than we could keep up with the timing of our process. And I'm certain that commercial property owners are telling us the same is happening as their values go down, that they're in the frontline trenches of the implications of their clients not renewing leases. We can't see that for a variety of reasons. So they'd have more real-time understanding of this reality, but they did when it was going up as well. So inherently there's a lag.
Okay. Do you see any impact on the amount of appeals of assessments potentially?
That's a good question. I'm sorry, I didn't, because we're in an appeal process right now. So
Okay.
I around where there were some key deadlines, and I should know that. I don't. So
Okay.
we'd be happy to describe that to you.
What about foreclosures and just I'm hearing that some of the assessed values or essentially the office market, a number of cases could be underwater, and whether these owners, developers are going to be handing keys back to banks. Are you concerned about that? Have you heard that? What, and if you can make it brief, because I just noticed that I'm over my
Yeah.
time.
Of course, we're concerned, of course. And that's part of the challenge of dealing with a central city with the change in the labor force, not coming into large office buildings.
Okay.
So, yes.
Councilmember Parker?
Okay. So there are several things. The child care subsidy, the mayor is proposing to increase that the eligibility for the district child care subsidy from 250% to 300% of the federal poverty line. Can you give a dollar amount and cost for that increase from 250% to
No, I can't.
300%?
I can't. We will provide one to you.
Okay,
That should be
yes.
something that we can do very quickly.
Thank you. And the reason why I'm asking is because I did ask the mayor's team and I have not gotten a clear answer on the cost of that. So that would be helpful. Then we have the ongoing school teacher investments. And I just want to get a sense from you, just for those that may be watching, the district issued a new contract for DPS teachers, which includes both 4 years of back pay and 4 increases in pay. The mayor has made a proposal for 2 years of back pay for charter teachers and 4 increases in pay. There are some charter advocates and others that are proposing to incorporate the charter-only investment in the UPSF.
Mhm.
I guess what I'm asking you here is a more theoretical question. It is my understanding that the DCPS teacher investments were not included in the UPSF. They were essentially one-time expenses outside of that per pupil fund. Would your office be able to, as a supplement to charters, incorporate the charter teacher back pay and future pay while also keeping things equal across DCPS and charter schools to meet that request from charter advocates to incorporate the charter enhancement in the
Mhm.
UPSFF? Is that a possibility?
I'd like us to investigate that. I'm not expert enough to say right now, yes, we can implement that.
Okay.
But I think that's a very good question and one that that our staff certainly would understand in detail.
Yes.
So.
And the
we would love to
complication for
engage-
me to wrap my
yeah.
mind around it is money has already been dispersed to DCPS teachers for back pay.
Mhm.
There is still forward pay that needs to be paid. I'm not sure, do you incorporate that in the UPSFF or do you keep it out? But I have heard pretty compelling narrative from charter advocates and school leaders that in order to pay teachers, make pay proposals for next year to hire teachers, it would be better to have that money in the UPSFF. And so, yeah, if you could even just say, is that possible in the future? If you could follow up, that would be helpful as we make a determination of what to do with that. Okay. SROs. I notice in your fiscal impact statement, you say there is no cost to the mayor's decision to reverse the council's decision to draw down SROs. And that makes sense. It is worth noting for those in the public, we have 40 SROs now. The mayor is only proposing to fund 40 SROs. However, with that reversal, and this is a yes or no, the mayor could have theoretically funded 100 SROs. Is that correct?
Of course, that's a policy decision and
That is a
allocation
policy
decision.
decision.
Right.
So it is inaccurate to suggest that the mayor was confined to the council's previous policy decision when she is in fact reversing it. That is
Well-
inaccurate to suggest that the mayor was confined to 40 SROs.
I'm not.
Well,
gonna
let me
speak-
ask a more direct question. Is it inaccurate to suggest that the mayor can only fund 40 SROs?
The mayor has the ability to articulate any resource allocation.
So I will speak for you and say, yes, it is inaccurate because as you suggested, which is my interpretation and the law, given this budget amendment and proposal to reverse the council's decision, the mayor could have proposed 200 SROs if she wanted to, but instead she proposed 40 SROs, which is the current number that we have. So that is that. And then I want to come to the Medicaid cap, which we've heard a lot about from hospitals, namely children's here, well, in Ward 5. And I just want to get a better sense from you. So your estimate and your fiscal impact statement puts the cap on Medicaid reimbursements at a savings of 11.3 million in local funds and 26.4 million in federal savings for the district. There's several questions here. If one wanted to, could we carve out children's hospital? And would your office be able to provide an estimate of what that savings would be? Because what we're hearing from children's, and they are unique in the services they provide, and as arguably the only locally based hospital here in the region, they are worried that these proposed caps would have devastating impacts on their services. I know that's a policy decision, but would you be able to carve out and provide an estimate if we wanted to exempt children's from that cap as a follow-up?
Yeah, we can try. I'm not familiar enough with how we track at that level. I would assume so, but we'd be happy to respond in writing or in a
Yes.
subsequent hearing.
Well, I would be
On-
interested as a member of the
Sure.
health committee
Sure.
to get a sense of what the cost savings would be if we were to exclude Children's Hospital and their affiliates. And by affiliates, meaning their satellite locations across the district.
Yes.
And I'm gonna skip that follow-up question there. I think that covers it, but in my last 20 seconds, I appreciate your engagement here, and there's just a number of follow-ups. So you're gonna share the dollar amount that has been reallocated outside of district banks, as well as follow up on what the cost might be in savings to exclude Children's Hospital and their affiliates from that Medicaid cap proposal by the mayor. And as well as the dollar amount and value of raising the child care voucher from 250% to 300% of the federal poverty. Thank you. Do you have a sense of how long that might take for your office to follow up on those things?
I don't have a sense, but what we can do is let you know exactly
Okay,
for
thank
each
you,
of
sir.
these items.
thank you, Chair McDuffie.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Mr. Lee, the OCFO's proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2024, as you stated, is $224.8 million, which is a 2.5% decrease from the approved fiscal year 2023 budget. There's I don't know, the actual budget book that we have says it's a 0.4% change from 2023 in terms of your FTEs, but it seems like it might be a miscalculation. Is it accurate that it's a 4.3 FTE overall increase proposed?
Yes.
Okay. In your testimony today stated that it involves a transfer of budget and FTEs from Octo. We've actually seen that in other agency budgets as well. So I wanted to let you explain what's behind the transfers of budget and FTEs from Octo.
I can't speak globally for that policy decision, but we engage Octo, as you can imagine, on a daily basis, dozens of our staff. So there's many opportunities to figure out with the Octo what responsibilities they do for us would come our direction. So we're happy to engage in that.
Okay.
But I can't explain the larger trend or the overall policy decision.
Got it. But do you all don't yet know what the expectations are in terms of the transfer of that?
That is correct.
Hmm.
But we have, that's, appreciate the context. We literally have dozens of touch points daily.
Okay.
And so we're working on different responsibilities arm in arm with Octo, so there could be adjustments to those responsibilities that would be easy for us to manage. So we look forward to engaging with them.
Okay. And the proposed budget has substantial shifts of 13.3 FTEs to information technology support. And your testimony this morning indicated this was to fund DIF's support center. This increase for IT support comes on top of the big increase in the current year fiscal 2023 budget, when there was a substantial increase of 17 million and 26 new FTEs funded for the same line item. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I recall from last year, the bulk of it was related to DIFs. You mentioned in your testimony that DIF stabilization efforts have started to normalize operations. So how many of the positions for IT support and DIFs you received for FY23 are filled?
Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that. As you know, all organizations are not filling as quickly as they'd like because of the difficult labor market that we have. I know we've hired many folks. I'm not sure exactly whether it's 3/4 or 2/3.
Okay,
We're happy to answer that.
The question that, would follow is whether you're in a position to hire for the 13 more positions in fiscal year 2024. But I appreciate that you have responded, that you'll follow up and provide us that information.
Mhm.
Okay. When I look at the budget book, it looks like you're consolidating the budget for financial control and reporting into accounting operations. Is that the case? And if so, what's behind that decision?
I'd like Paul to answer that.
Okay.
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, that is the case. And that's within our Office of Financial Operations and Systems, our controller's office. And they have determined that's a better way to organize their internal operations within that controller's office.
Okay, so just purely moving existing funds to some other part of the budget?
Yes, as you see there, it's all within the office area, losing 26 from that one activity and moving all those positions to the accounting operations.
Got it. There's a proposed reduction of 7 FTEs for external customer service information in the tax administration program. This follows a significant increase in FTEs last fiscal year. Were these positions ever filled?
I can't speak to those specific positions, but in that area, there was a reduction that was needed. We looked across the agency to reallocate FTEs to fund the needs in the DIF support center. And so those were some of those, where some of those came from was the OTR customer service area. And they determined that they could continue their operations with that lower level of FTEs.
Okay, so the increase last year has since been followed by a determination that it's not necessary to have that many FTEs there.
Yes.
And, again, the context is the hiring. We're all struggling with bringing folks on. And when we're faced with a variety of challenging needs, we have to, within our own budget, reorganize it the best we can. And certainly a non-trivial factor is how much success are we having in hiring folks in a particular area. So we in this labor market are doing our best to keep up our services as everyone else is. And when we have a net new demand as the new financial system requires on us, we will have to move some FTEs around in order to meet that if we need to live within our budget, and we are.
Okay. How many vacancies does the office currently have?
102 total out of 1061 authorized.
So about a 10% vacancy, 100 plus. That figure has come down. We're having a fair amount of luck in the market right now. I believe it was 30 or 40 higher just a few months ago. So hats off to our HR team and management team for working hard to bring folks in.
And what's the salary lapse to date for the agency?
Well, salary lapse can reference the gap between if all positions were fully funded versus what we have on board now. And that salary lapse would be projected out for the year. For local funds, that's 7.8 million. However, we have a budgeted salary lapse need of 8.6 million. So right now, we don't quite have enough vacancies to cover our budgeted lapse.
Got it. You had mentioned in your testimony that you'll need to plan for a 10% vacancy rate moving forward. I wanted to just give you an opportunity to explain what that means and why that is.
What that means is that we have to ensure on average throughout a year, 1 out of every 10 positions we have is vacant. As Mr. Lundquist was just pointing out, we're not quite at that level right now. We're probably at a level of 8% vacancy rather than 10. So what that means in the over time, we're going to have to hold positions open, which is, when you think about it, a stunning reversal from where government employment has been for the last 2 or 3 years, where we had more positions than I mean, generally, whether it's the district or other jurisdictions, whether we could actually fill what we have. Now we're in a position with this proposed budget where we're going to have to hold positions open beyond our natural rate of vacancy in order to make the vacancy target.
Okay.
The budget.
What
proposed.
is your natural rate of vacancy?
That's so difficult to say. As I was briefed when I took the job a few months ago, it was roughly about 4% prior to the pandemic. The labor market, of course, is upside down with the labor with the pandemic and post-pandemic developments. And I believe we're averaging right now about 8%. Could
Okay.
that be typical? Who knows? Especially if the economy slows down, I think we may see positions filled faster because there's fewer jobs.
Okay. I think the office reported reprogramming funds in FY 2022 within I think it totaling approximately $4.2 million. Have you reprogrammed funds in FY 23? And if so, for what and for how much?
None to date.
Do you anticipate reprogramming funds in this fiscal year?
We may have that need as we're looking forward to the second half of the year. Nothing specific at this time.
All right. Do you know for FY 22 when those reprogrammings occurred?
Yes, we do. We can get you that information.
So it was 4.2. You know how many reprogrammings it was that contributed to $4.2 million?
We'd say a handful.
Or you can give me the information.
Yes,
Maybe.
we can get you the information.
Okay.
I would say right now a handful.
I'm not sure how much a handful is actually.
That's
Uh,
5 or so.
We talked a little bit earlier about CBEs, but I wanted to spend a little bit more time with it. There are more than 30 active contracts and a couple dozen more in progress listed on attachment 1 of the common budget question responses that you all provided to the committee ahead of this hearing. How many of those are with SBEs or CBEs based in the district?
The earlier information we had provided in February listed 79 contracts with 30 CBEs.
Okay.
And it should roughly be the same portion now.
And what is your CBE spend goal for fiscal year 23? And
It's,
what's the rate that you're spending, or how much have you spent thus far on CBEs in this fiscal year?
I don't have the how much, but the goal for 23 is currently at 24.8 million.
24, right. What was your 22 goal?
22 goal was ended the year at 15.8. That was an increase to what we reported in February. There were some year-end adjustments,
Sure.
but our actual was still was over 16 million actual, so we still exceeded the goal, even the adjusted goal.
What was the actual number for 22?
16 million.
Okay.
16.0.
Got it. And you said your actual end of the year adjusted goal increased?
It didn't, yes, to 15.8.
Okay, I mean, usually I hear agencies' goals decrease over the course of a year, no?
Many times yeah, it varies.
Okay, do you know to what that increase at the end is attributed to?
In our case, it was due to some reprogrammings during the course of the year that they adjusted for, which gave us additional budget in our NPS area.
Okay. And can you follow up with the committee in terms of what you've spent thus far in FY 2023? Generally, I want to know whether you're on track to meet your goal.
We expect to meet our goal. And within that higher goal, you'll notice, obviously, the goal for 23 is higher. And so there are still some pending adjustments and waiver requests that we have
Sure.
put forward to DSLBD. So we continue to work with them.
Okay. Let's talk about your capital budget. You mentioned in your testimony, and I mentioned in my opening about your capital budget and the fact that you actually don't have one for FY 24. Talk about, actually in your testimony, you mentioned that the impact of the capital funding that was not restored for FY 23 and FY 24 for the DIFS project, and that as a result, the Oracle budget module will not be implemented. What functionality was the Oracle budget module to provide, and what does that mean for the agency, its ability to meet its mission and functions moving forward?
Well, let me start with the first half of that question. The financial system, modern financial systems have various components, from payroll components to core financial transactional components, which is what we've implemented, treasury components, the interface with banks, and then usually a budget component as well. And a budget component will draw data out of the system and allow for the baseline or current effort, current service forecasts to be developed with a lot of precision and fully interfaced with the accounting system. The extreme is just of not being integrated is simply doing downloads out of the accounting system, put them on spreadsheets and multiply your inflators from that. A budget system that's inherent in the financial system allows for all of that mechanisms to handle inherently in the system rather than pulling it out. And quite frankly, when you pull data out and have separate systems, you end up with mistakes. And we've talked at length about a particular mistake we made today. Not today, but today we've spoken about a mistake. So having an integrated budget system reduces your mistakes through the budgeting process, as well as streamlines your budgeting process quite a bit. Without this funding, we can't implement the budgeting module. That has been true since long before I came here. This money was set aside for that. So we will develop with our own staff a proprietary software that hopefully will be temporary just for the next fiscal year. For developing the fiscal year 2025 budget. And our focus will be on executing specifically our responsibilities in the budget formulation process. So it'll be far simpler, but it could be that many of our stakeholders will not get as sophisticated information as they normally have. But in the end, we have a responsibility under federal law to formulate the budget, and we will carry that out. I have confidence in our staff. This is a stressful change for us, make no mistake, but I'm confident in our preliminary plans. I'm confident in my management team to pull something together.
Okay. It does appear though that your office has FTEs that are capital funded. And so what projects are related to those FTEs?
The vast majority would be implementing the new financial system.
Okay.
The whole system.
Okay, and that is related to, there are 22 fewer capital funded FTEs for 2024.
Right.
Anything you want to share about those 22 fewer, or just all related to the cuts?
It's related to the cuts, and also we're at a different stage in the program where we're now implemented and executing transactions. So you need fewer people to be doing the programming than we did a year ago, certainly, as we were still designing and developing the program. So that's a natural cycle of implementing new systems.
Okay. I think there's some, I know that there's definitely some follow-up that we'll expect at the committee. I don't have any additional questions for you and your team at the moment. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the record before we close out? It looks like Mr. Nicholas might have something.
Yes, I have an answer regarding the number of reprogramming. So we actually have two handfuls.
Okay.
6 that were internal reprogrammings, where we reallocated funding to better run our operations, and 4 were external reprogrammings. In those cases were where we had excess SPR budget authority
Mhm.
that we were not using, so those were used elsewhere in the district.
How much was the excess SPR budget authority that was reprogrammed outside of the agency?
I have to get you that.
Okay,
Mhm.
and can you let me know you said how many were external?
4 of those.
4 were related to the SPR. Okay, all right, if you can make sure that we follow up on that, or you follow up with us on that. All right, thanks. Anything else you'd like to add to the record, Mr. Lee?
No, sir.
Thank you very much for your time and testimony this morning.
Of course.
The next agency we will hear from is the Office of Lottery and Gaming, or the lottery. The mission of the lottery is to generate revenue for the district through the sale of lottery and sports wagering products. The office is also tasked with gaming regulation and oversight of its products. The lottery's proposed fiscal year 2024 operating budget is $350 million, which represents a 2.8% decrease from its approved fiscal year 2023 operating budget. The agency has budgeted for 93 FTEs, the same number of FTEs as in its fiscal year 2023 approved budget. With that, I'm going to call up our public witnesses for this agency. They'll have 3 minutes to provide testimony. And just as a reminder to all of our witnesses to mute your mic when you're not speaking. The 2 public witnesses who've signed up to testify are Trupti Patel, Commissioner ANC 2A03, and Cole Wogelman, Government Relations Manager, National Council on Problem Gambling. We're going to begin with Commissioner Patel. Good morning to you. Always a pleasure to have you appear before the committee. You can begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson McDuffie. Forgive me, for some reason, something's happened with my laptop and you can't see me, but I hope you can definitely hear me.
We can hear you loudly and clearly.
All right, so, good morning. Thank you for hosting this hearing so that our comments may be entered for the permanent record. My name is Tripti Patel, and I'm a third-term ANC commissioner that represents single-member District 2A03, which is the historic Foggy Bottom. This is now the fourth time I'm appearing before you in the committee in regards to sports wagering and the Office of Lottery and Gaming. Well, it seemed that the third time was the charm to compel Director Frank Suarez to respond in writing to the recommendations that I asked to be implemented. To be honest, I found Director Suarez's response at the last hearing in regards to my testimony disappointing. He was dismissive and tone deaf, which is echoed in his response that he officially gave to ANC 2A. While I was satisfied with the content of the response, it came from a space of disdain and one of how dare I ask questions on an important topic that advisory neighborhood commissions/commissioners must weigh in on. I'd like to remind him that it's my taxpaying dollars that fund his salary. I'm entitled to question why a policy initiative isn't working properly, especially when he continues to state that it works and wants budget funding. So my apparent no record of no reach out is simple because there wasn't a way to reach out to this agency. As I know, I asked the Alcohol Beverage Control Agency for a point of contact on this issue, but wasn't given one. When I did go to the website, there wasn't a way to reach out to anyone. And this is the experience that the other ANCs have shared with me. The fact that we just couldn't get in touch with anybody from Office of Lottery and Gaming. I know this isn't another round of performance oversight, but I highlight this as due to the lackluster performance of sports wagering since its implementation. This has not lived up to the promise of revenue generation, and no one wants to use it since the feedback is that the app doesn't work and that it's not user-friendly and it is most restrictive. Sadly, the first $200,000 of revenue generation was earmarked to address the problem of sports gambling. I recognize the irony of that. However, not a penny has gone to this very earmark. The now $600,000 is being held. The mayor has now put this on the chopping block and now wants the funding to go into a general fund. This very action signals to the incredible dysfunctionality of this agency. If DC is going to have sports betting, then it has to work correctly, generating the revenue so that it funds the vital and essential programs. If anything, I'd like to see the $600,000 be split up between the priorities such as funding the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights and the local Voting Rights Act. In addition, I'm extremely disappointed to see that the monumental groundbreaking legislation that would lift so many out of poverty that is known as baby bonds is not going to have funding. I hope your colleagues find the funding for it. On a final note, I find this entire budget incredibly hostile to DC residents. It is cruel and inhumane to the vulnerable and the poor residents. I'm happy to address questions and provide further clarification. Thank you, Chairperson McDuffie.
And thank you for your testimony this morning, Commissioner. Next on our witness list is Cole Wogelman.
Hi, Councilmember. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can also see you.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us. You can begin your testimony.
Great. Thank you. I'm here today to speak on behalf of the National Council on Problem Gambling, NCPG, the sole national advocate for problem gamblers and their loved ones. NCPG's mission is to lead state and national stakeholders in the development of comprehensive policies and programs for all those affected by problem gambling. NCPG is neither for nor against legalized gambling. Let me start by saying that the DC Lottery is a member of ours, and we are very much appreciative of their support over the years. We have a very solid working relationship with the leadership of the DC Lottery, and we hope to continue that in the coming years. We're not here today to speak about the lottery directly, but rather about the funding problem gambling resources, which the commissioner just touched on. The mayor's proposed budget eliminates the $200,000 a year set aside for problem gambling treatment and research, and repeals the provision that takes the $200,000 from sports betting tax revenue every year. When sports betting was first being legalized, we testified at the bill's hearing on best practices for jurisdictions that legalize sports betting. Following the hearing, the council agreed to devote the first $200,000 in revenue from it to, quote, fund programs to the Department of Behavioral Health to prevent, treat, and research gambling addiction. The amount of money is much less than we requested. We believe any future sports betting legislation in the district should designate a minimum of $1 million for problem gambling. However, rather than asking for a budget increase, we are begging the council to maintain the $200,000 as the mayor's budget sweeps the money and uses a subtitle to eliminate the funding provision. This would make the district one of 9 states that have $0 for problem gambling. Maryland spends over $4 million a year on resources for gambling addiction, and Virginia over $2 million. The mayor is proposing the district spend $0. Although this money is intended for DBH, this is relevant to your committee, Mr. Chairman, because the subtitle appealing to the $200,000 designation amends the Sports Betting Legalization Act and therefore falls under your committee's jurisdiction. Let me be very clear. There are currently between 12,000 and 15,000 residents of the district suffering from gambling addiction. However, the government has 0 resources for those residents to seek help. Unlike drug and alcohol addiction, DBH has no programs for those suffering from gambling addiction. They are left to suffer on their own, often with disastrous consequences such as bankruptcy or even suicide. There's now a sports book at Nationals Park, one at Capitol Arena, and one at Audi Field. And in fact, the operators of all 3 of those sports books have submitted letters to the council supporting this $200,000. The district also runs a sports betting app, and there are multiple restaurants in the district with sports betting kiosks. This is, of course, in addition to the lottery. This proposed cut is profoundly distressing to us. These programs serve as lifelines for individuals with gambling addiction. We know from operating the National Problem Gambling Helpline that just under 5,000 calls to the helpline were made from the district in 2022, a 35% increase from 2021. We also know that those with gambling problems are at higher risk of suicide, drug or alcohol dependence, and bankruptcy. I ask the committee to use the budget to reject the mayor's proposed subtitle repealing this funding so that comprehensive programs can be developed and lives depend on it. I'm happy to answer questions. I apologize for reading so fast, but wanted to fit into the 3 minutes.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. Believe that did you both submit your written testimony for the committee?
Yes.
Great. Commissioner, did you have a chance to submit written testimony? I know we have the follow-up from the performance oversight hearing, the resolution that you shared from ANC 2A, but if you'd like, we'd encourage you to submit your written testimony from this morning as well.
Chairperson McDuffie, I will send it to you as soon as I log off. I have it written out, and I wanted to ask you, did you want a resolution from ANC 2A on this around this hearing, or are you okay without one, sir?
Well, it is totally up to you and your colleagues at ANC 2A. Let me actually ask you a quick question based on the response that you got from Mr. Suarez. Is there anything specifically that you would like to ask as a matter of follow-up to that response?
I have yet to share the response with the rest of my colleagues. Mr. Suarez actually directed the response to the chairperson of ANC 2A versus me. I mean, I know we were both listed as representatives, but ANC 2A is actually looked at me more as the expert on this issue and topic. So I will be sharing all of the information with the rest of my colleagues, but it just was a little, I guess you could say, off-putting the last couple of times. And I think it's kind of been leaving like a little bit of a sour taste in my colleagues' mouths and honestly the constituents, just to kind of see like Executive Director Suarez couldn't be compelled to respond until I testified a 3rd time on the very exact issues I flagged.
Well, when you have the opportunity to, if your plan is to share the response with your colleagues and you do follow up, as you have in the past, please loop in the committee in your interactions, just so we can follow how this goes and see if there's a need for us to do any specific follow-up ourselves. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Chairperson McDuffie.
Thank you. Mr. Waldman, I appreciate your testimony. Like you and I imagine so many others, I was really shocked to see the elimination of the funds to support problem gambling in the mayor's proposed budget. And although the amount, relatively speaking, is not as large as other programs, to have it eliminated means that it will be a challenge to identify funds within the budget to replace it. And so I wanted to put that on the record. I appreciate your testimony this morning, but you are not alone in your sentiments that you expressed today about the mayor's proposed budget. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairperson McDuffie.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're going to, I want to thank you both for your testimony. We're going to move next to Mr. Frank Suarez, Executive Director of the Office of Lottery and Gambling, who, like the CFO, is present in the council today. So we want to thank Mr. Suarez and his team for joining us in person for this hearing. It is the tradition of this committee to swear in all government witnesses who appear before it. So if you all could, if you don't mind raising your right hands. Do you swear or affirm on the penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide before the council of the District of Columbia in this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you each. The record reflects that they responded in the affirmative. We're going to turn to you to provide your testimony. You have 7 minutes. And again, we thank you for joining us.
All right. Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am Frank Suarez, Executive Director of the Office of Lottery and Gaming. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on OLG's fiscal year 2024 budget. Joining me today are my colleagues, Ridgely Bennett, Chief Counsel for OLG, Craig Lindsay, our Agency Fiscal Officer, and Peter Alvarado, Director of Regulation and Oversight. And I do have a PowerPoint. If we could move to the next slide, that'd be great. Just really quickly, you've already touched on this, but just as a reminder, here's OLG's mission and an overview of our key functions. It really emphasizes OLG's commitment to responsibly growing revenue for the district through both sales growth and expense management, while also working to provide best-in-class regulatory oversight for gaming throughout the district. Next slide, please. Now, as we look at OLG's fiscal year 2024 gross funds operating budget is $350 million, which supports a total of 93 full-time equivalents or FTEs. This is $10 million less than the fiscal year 2023 budget of $360 million. Additionally, while the current version of the fiscal year 2024 budget proposed budget eliminates funding that was directed to the Department of Behavioral Health for the prevention and treatment of problem gambling, I just want to reiterate OLG's commitment to responsible gaming throughout the district. Now, our financial operations accounts for the largest portion of OLG's budget at $268.5 million, or about 77% of the budget. Financial operations includes financial management services, pricing, commissions, and transfer to the general fund. And then our gaming operations makes up about 19% of the budget at $66.9 million. And this portion of OLG's budget includes support services for retailers and players so that they can truly benefit from the portfolio of gaming offered by OLG. So this includes marketing, trade development, which is our sales department, draw operations, licensing, and claim center operations are also funded under gaming operations. Gaming operations also supports OLG's regulatory responsibilities for privately operated sports books, games of skill, and charitable gaming operated by nonprofits. Now, the smallest portion of the budget is agency management at 4.2% or $14.6 million. And this funds administrative support and resources for OLG operations and programs. Now, as a sales and revenue generating entity, OLG is an enterprise fund and relies on its revenue generation to determine its budget and deliver on its mission. The impact of the pandemic on OLG's operations, its retailers and players persists, and OLG's efforts to increase revenue continue to evolve as we work to overcome a diminished commuter base and city population, while also combating the significant rise of inflation and gas prices that introduce a completely new level of economic challenges for both players and retailers in 2022. Now, mitigating the impact of these obstacles will be an ongoing challenge for both OLG and its retailers. fiscal year 2024 will benefit from much of the innovation and optimization efforts implemented by OLG in 2023. Lottery will continue its modernization efforts that include having fully completed the implementation of all new point of sale equipment at retail, a pilot of new touchscreen vending machines, and a new DC Lottery mobile app that will allow players to check their tickets and play iLottery wherever they go. Lottery's instant ticket optimization initiatives continue progressing, having optimized ticket sizes and price structures, along with new game planning tools being introduced. And then ongoing iLottery growth will be supported with new e-instant games, now launching every 2 weeks, and the addition of a new third-party e-instant game provider that will expand the game variety for our players online. Gambit DC will look to maintain its strong growth momentum, having revamped its user experience across all its platforms, mobile, web, and retail, and providing continued product enhancements, which include new betting options such as same game parlays and a new rookie mode that'll make it easier for novice sports bettors to place wagers, while also building on the success of its optimized marketing strategies and continuing its retail expansion across the district. Privately operated sports wagering is also expected to continue to grow. The lottery's regulation and oversight division has been notified of 4 potential new Class B operators in the district, looking at potentially being new operators. Now, I'm enthusiastic about the opportunity to build on the momentum we have achieved thus far, and I look forward to the continued responsible growth of gaming revenue for the district. In closing, Chairman McDuffie, I would like to thank you, the council, and the mayor for continued support of the Office of Lottery and Gaming and for this opportunity today. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you for your testimony. I do have some questions for you this morning. Let's begin with responsible gaming. You mentioned it early on in your testimony. Specifically, you stated, and I'm quoting here, that OLG remains committed to responsible gaming. Close quote. The elimination of the funding that was directed to the Department of Health for the prevention of treatment of gambling addiction, with that being eliminated in the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget, what resources, well, a better way to ask might be to say, describe what that commitment is. So be specific, describe what OLG's commitment to responsible gaming is, and whether there are any specific funds budgeted at OLG to address problem gaming in your 23 budget currently, and in your 2024 proposed budget?
Yes. So as I said, we take responsible gaming very seriously. It's in our mission to do gaming and operate and both regulate in a responsible way. And so, it really functions throughout the organization, first in the way that we operate. So in the way that we advertise our games, the way we talk about our games, making sure players are informed about how the games play, what the odds are, making sure we don't advertise any promissory wins. There's several guidelines that we follow to just make sure that we advertise and market our games in a very responsible way. So I just want to mention that first. We also provide our players online that play our gaming online with additional what we would call responsible gaming tools, where they can limit how much they lose. They can look at how much time they spend, limit how much they deposit. There are multiple tools that they're able to use online. And we also added online the ability for someone to self-exclude. So if they feel like they have a problem or are on the verge of a problem, they can self-exclude online, and that way they don't have to worry about losing control in that sense. We also do provide funds to the National Council on Problem Gambling. I can't remember the exact amount, and I don't know, Craig, if you would know, but we do provide that, and that just supports the problem gambling phone number that we provide to all players. So if anyone were to have a problem or feel like they have a problem, you will see that number pretty much advertised in most everything that we do. But we can provide you the amount that we fund, but we fund that every year. And, you know, I think, again,
Let me, go ahead, I'm sorry. You were
well,
finishing.
I was just gonna finish with, we support any funding that is available for problem gambling. We think the more resources, the better.
And do you know, and I don't know if Mr. Lindsay knows how much is provided, I think you said to the National Council on Problem Gaming?
Yes. That's what I think we have to follow up on the number. Yeah, there's a membership fee, and I think it's included in that.
do you know what the funds you provide to the National Council on Problem Gambling are provided to do?
Yeah, it supports, my understanding is it supports the problem gambling number. So we provide a number that anyone that might feel like they have an issue or know someone that might have an issue can call or chat or, you know, text and get help or assistance.
Okay.
And they get access or get sort of directed to the right resources.
I appreciate that, and I think that's very important, so I'm glad that you're doing that. Let me point out what appears to be a glaring problem, though. Let's assume a person calls, and according to the testimony of Cole Walgerman, there are currently between 12,000 and 15,000 residents of the district suffering from gambling addiction. If somebody, one of those 12,000 or 15,000 residents calls the number that the membership that you all are paying to the National Council on Problem Gambling supports, where then do they go to receive help? And what funds, if any, is the district using to support the help that they receive after calling a number?
Well, I think, you know, what help they receive after they call, I think it's just going to be dependent on the issue that the player has. I don't have the specifics on, you know, is there specific treatment providers or clinics, or, you know, if they refer them to local problem gambling groups and programs. I'm sure there's probably a variety of places that they send them. I will tell you that I'm not aware of any funding, but again, for treatment, that wouldn't be something that it's under our purview. The Department of Behavioral Health has that.
So how much has your agency transferred to Department of Behavioral Health since the inception of sports gaming?
So just to be clear, we don't transfer. So the funds from tax revenue from privately operated goes straight to tax
Okay.
and revenue. And the first 200,000 that is generated every year is technically by statute provided to the Department of Behavioral Health for that.
So what's your understanding of how much has been provided to the Department of Behavioral Health thus far?
Based on where we had, I would say, and Craig, keep me on 600,000, or is it less?
Can you turn your mic on, Mr. Lindsay?
Oh, yeah.
And just state your name for the record.
Good morning, Chairman McDuffie. My name is Craig Lindsay. I'm the agency fiscal officer for lottery. I believe in the first performance hearing, I received notification from someone with OTR who informed me that there was a $200,000 transfer that I believe took place in November of 2022.
Mhm.
Now, I can't speak to as to whether that was the first transfer or which transfer that was, but when I posed the question of the amount that has been transferred, that was the response I
Okay.
received.
I'd like for you all to follow up just to consult the OCFO. Obviously, the office and the CFO just left. And we can follow up, but we'd love to get your help in just, you know, given your role. I do understand financially, it's not money that you all are transferring literally over, but it is money that was by law supposed to assist with some challenges that residents face in the District of Columbia. And let me just, I'm gonna quote the last part of Mr. Walgerman's testimony. I already said that, and this is a quote, the testimony says, there are currently between 12,000 and 15,000 residents of the district suffering from a gambling addiction. However, the government has zero resources for those residents to seek help. That's disturbing. And do you have any insights as to whether any of the $200,000 that was transferred by the CFO's office to Department of Behavioral Health for problem gambling has been spent to address challenges with problem gambling?
I do think that the department would be best to answer that, but I do know that we followed up with them. And Peter, I know we had gotten a response from them that I don't believe that it's been spent yet, but they would need to confirm.
Okay, thank you for that. You all have an office in Ward 8.
Yes.
Can you describe what that office is
Yes.
engaged in doing on behalf of the agency?
Yes, so that is our headquarters. So that has our prize center where players can come in and claim prizes above 600 and below, but usually it's for prizes 600 and above. And also pretty much most of the operations of the agency are there. So it houses offices for marketing and sales and finance, our IT services, pretty much all operations from headquarters perspective are in that office.
Okay, and how many vacancies does your office currently have?
I believe it's 19.
19. And what's the vacancy savings rate for the agency?
So we don't budget vacancy savings. However, from the vacant positions and the amounts that are budgeted for those positions, it's about 2 point. Currently, it's I apologize for that. Here. Look. Currently, it's 1.7 in salaries, and then the fringe benefits to go along with that of 410,000.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Looking at your budget, the proposed telecommunications budget for fiscal year 2024 as proposed increases by 74.3% compared to the approved fiscal year 2023 amount. What do you all attribute that increase to?
So again, Chairman McDuffie, there are certain costs that the lottery has budgeted. Those costs are estimates that are provided to us by different agencies. And that particular amount was the amount that was provided to the lottery as what we should budget for telecommunications for FY24.
From what agency?
It's usually from October.
So Octo's asking you all to budget 74% more than what you budgeted for this current fiscal year?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what are they asking you to do that for? What is that money gonna go to?
So what we usually receive in terms of the estimates, they don't speak to specifics. I mean, they're very generic. For example, telecommunications is what will be in the estimates. It doesn't speak to the types of service or the specific types of services that's going to require that funding.
Okay, and how much was it budgeted for telecommunication services in FY 2022?
Me too.
I have
can tell you-
200.
I'm looking at the budget chapter right
Okay,
now.
all right.
In 2022, it was 137 was the actual, is what we actually.
Right, and it was budgeted for 242, I think, originally.
Correct.
And do you have the 2021 numbers?
For 2021, I have the actual.
How much is it?
2021, the actual was 140,000.
So the actual numbers for 2021 is how much?
The actual was 140,000.
140,000?
Yes,
The actual for 2022 is how much?
137,000.
137,000.
I'm sorry. Forgive me, I'm sorry. Telecommunications, 251,000 in 2021,
Okay,
and in 2022 was 242,000.
okay, those are the numbers I have. I was,
Yeah, I'm looking at
okay,
the
all
wrong line.
right,
Apologize.
all right. And so the approved 2023 though is 170,000.
Correct.
So what is Ocfo doing for you all? Can you speak to like what they actually do?
I honestly can't speak to what they're doing in terms of telecommunications for us, but I mean, but I can only imagine there are a lot of, so we do have our own IT staff at the lottery.
Okay,
However, a lot of the infrastructure that is used by the lottery actually also is provided by Ocfo as well. So there's some support there in terms of infrastructure as it relates to.
are these capital dollars or operating dollars?
These are operating dollars.
So in terms of infrastructure, does operating dollars usually support infrastructure or?
Well, when I say infrastructure, it could be anything from servers,
Got it.
equipment such as that.
And that's usually supported by operating dollars.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so it's 251 in 21, 242,000 in FY 22, drops down to 170,000 this current fiscal year. Do you have the numbers on how much you've spent thus far in fiscal year 2023 on telecommunications?
I don't have the current spend, but I can certainly get that.
Okay, but they're proposing that it be increased, like I said, by 74% to $297,000 for FY 2024, and then back down, well, I don't even know what they're proposing on the out years, but it's in the grand scheme of your budget, it's not a huge number.
Right.
It's just something that jumps out at me
Okay.
in terms of the fluctuation. And if you all can shed some light on that in the follow-up, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
There is a huge increase in the proposed budget for CSG 35 fixed occupancy costs. Can you tell us what's driving that increase?
Sure. Once again, this is another one of those costs that are estimates that come to us.
From which agency?
DGS. So
Okay.
DGS usually handles the occupancy fixed costs. And those costs are usually costs that are associated with maintaining the building, maintaining the grounds of the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were those costs in 21? I have, seems like a fairly small number.
In 21,000.
In 22?
In 22, there's no cost showing at all. It's actual.
So they didn't charge y'all, they just maintained it for free? Okay, which means they could probably maintain it for free again if that money disappears? Okay, because it went down, I mean, it went up to 3,000
Mhm.
in 2023, this current fiscal year, but it's proposed to be 49,000 next year. Got it. The proposed new decrease in agency fiscal operations is $8.3 million. From what's approved in FY 2023. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
What do you all attribute that reduction to?
I believe that's based on the revenue estimates and the pricing for the games going down. So how much we expect to pay out, but I'll let Craig confirm.
That's correct. That's attributed to a decrease in the prizes.
Okay, well, why do y'all expect to see a decrease in the prizes?
So the specific prizes that were decreased were the sports wagering prizes.
Why do you all expect there to be a decrease in the sports wagering prizes?
Based on what we've actually spent in the past couple of years.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let me look and see here. This line had. Do you have for 2021, 222,000+?
For which line?
This would be agency, fiscal,
Right.
financial operations, I guess it's a 100F.
So in 2023, the budget for prizes for sports was $72.9 million.
Right, okay. $72.9 million. I don't know why I don't see that number specifically.
And it went down to 63 million.
Where are you looking in the book, the budget book?
Well, I'm actually looking in another sheet, but in the budget book, it's going to be on. So in the budget book, you're not going to see it broken out that way because the budget book is broken out by CSG.
Okay,
So it's going to be all of 50. I'm looking at something that's a little more detailed that actually shows all of the line items within the 50 CSG.
okay, so if you could, what was the first year that you all had? This shows up. And this is for the lottery or for sports gaming?
This is for lottery. This is for lottery operated.
Okay. So what was the amount in the budget for FY 2021?
Actually, I'd have to give, let's see, well, I don't have the details for that year. So I'd have to get back to you with what we actually budgeted for.
Mr. Lindsay, if you don't mind, if you could just either move the mic closer or maybe come closer to.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think it's better,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. So we'd have to get back to you with that. I don't have the details for FY 2021 as to what we actually budgeted for sports.
Okay, you have the actual spend?
Let's see if I have.
You have it for
I do-
2022?
I do have the
Okay.
actual. Okay, so in 2021, we paid out $34.5 million in prizes. 2021,
34.5 million.
Mhm.
Okay, what about 2022?
2022, we paid out $50.4 million.
And how much have you played out to, do you have the numbers? How much you paid out to date?
36.8 million. And
36.
that number is as of March 31st.
Okay, so 34.5 and 21, 50.4 and 22, 36.8, and this is fiscal year, right?
Yes.
Okay, so half the year, halfway to the year, you paid 36, almost 37,000. So it's not reasonable to assume that you'll pay twice that amount in the second half?
No, and that's
Just
just because
because
the
the events-
seasonality of sports. So with us, we see the majority of the revenue during the football season.
Okay,
And then the rest of the year sort of winds down to a much lower rate.
okay, and what's the projected for 2023?
Projected prize amount. And I don't have a projected prize amount currently.
Okay, do y'all make projections in that area or no?
Well, we make projections on the handle, for example, like how much in handle. So I believe, what did we end up? It's 70 million in handle. And then we assume about a 10% payout. So then you can just assume you know, that we're paying out 90% of the 70.
Okay. So for 2024, what's the number?
The number for the
Prizes.
prizes,
Prizes,
63 million.
63 million.
Yeah, 23, 62.
Okay. In the gaming operations program, there's a proposed decrease for sports wagering regulation of $2.6 million from the approved fiscal year 23 amount. There's no corresponding reduction in FTEs that we can see. How will the reduction of that $2.6 million impact the agency's ability to regulate sports wagering?
That reduction is due to, previously we were outsourcing the due diligence for licensing. But now we're taking that in-house. I'll let Peter sort of speak to the specifics.
And if you could just state your name for the record.
Sure, Peter Alvarado. Yeah, initially, when we started on sports wagering, regulating it, we were outsourcing the due diligence because we just didn't have fully staffed and we were new to the regulation of sports wagering. Now, as we've gained experience, we've taken it on. We don't outsource it. We all do it in-house. And so that cut the cost of, because outsourcing was pretty costly.
Are there increases to FTEs as a result of bringing it in-house?
I don't think we've increased it. No, we
So-
haven't increased.
So you are essentially absorbing the cost within existing resources of doing that function.
We are.
And this 2.6 million represents the entire amount that you are using for the due diligence?
I think it was allocated that much. I don't think we ever got to that level.
Okay, so how much is allocated, just so I'm clear, in FY 23?
I'm not sure. I'd have to probably defer to Craig.
I believe in 23, it's the same 2.7. It actually doesn't go down until 2024. Right. So in 20.
So
in
what
23,
what is included in the sports wagering regulations? Appears to be 6,900.
Right.
What's included in that amount? Because what shows up as the approved amount is $5.1 million.
where you're seeing 5.1 million for,
I am seeing it.
so that may be their total budget. That's their total budget. It's all line items. That's their total budget.
Do you know where I'm referring to?
Yeah, that's the total budget for the sports and regulatory department.
Right. So what goes into that 5.1?
Sure.
If that, so
So
that part of the budget, sports wagering regulation includes the due diligence function that you all are going to bring in-house.
Yes, as well as all their other line items, salaries, benefits, and then some other sundry line items.
Does that appear anywhere in the budget book broken down by what you just mentioned, salaries, benefits, and?
In the budget book?
Yes.
It should, yes. I'll tell you. It's page. Okay, so in the budget book, it just shows you the total amount, not the details.
Can you all follow up with
Yeah.
us specifically on the details of that?
Which detail, I have the detail.
It's essentially what's included in
Sure,
the,
I can tell you right now.
it looks like subtotal 6,000 gaming operations
Sure.
program is how it
Sure,
reads.
I can tell you what they have currently in their budget. 5,000 in office supplies, 5,000 in general supplies and materials, 5,000 in conference fees, travel, $20,000 in travel out of the city, 60,000 in professional services, 5,500 in employee training, $15,000 in conference fees, $10,000 in membership dues, $20,000 in IT software maintenance, 2.775 million in contractual services, 630,000 in IT consulting contracts, and 160,000 in equipment and rental IT hardware,
And all those things you just mentioned add up to what amount now?
5.121.
Got it. Okay. Can you share that with the committee?
Sure, absolutely.
What's your CB spending goal for this current fiscal year and how much progress have you made to date? Your mic's not on.
Oh, sorry. For fiscal 23, I believe the goal is 20.8 million.
20
0.8.
million?
Yeah.
And is that number usually adjusted at the end
It
of the
is.
fiscal year?
It is, because it happened for 22 as well.
Okay. What was your spend? What was your goal in 2022 and what was your actual spend?
So the goal was just adjusted in 2022, I believe, to 18.5 million. And our spend was over that, about 18.9. Oh, 18 million. Okay. And that's at, I think we were a little bit over 100% of the goal.
Okay. And where are you in terms of your spend to date?
So the spend to date is not loaded in the district enterprise system as of yet.
Okay.
However, based upon the current overall spending in the lottery currently, as well as the goal for this year and how it measures to last year, I mean, we're trending to meet, we're going to trend to meet the goal.
Okay.
For sure.
And does your Office of Lottery and Gaming CBE goal include contracts to outside vendors?
Sorry, yeah. I would think
It does?
so.
So anything that's being spent by, Intralot on either side of like lottery or sports betting is included in what you all just mentioned in terms of like the 2022 goal and actual spend? Okay. And you're confident that you're going to meet that goal in 2023?
Yes, we usually meet and surpass our goal every year. I don't think
Okay.
this year would be any different.
What was the actual amount of the lotteries transferred to the general fund in fiscal year 2022?
In 22, it was total from OOG 40.7 million.
And what was the original projection for 23?
23's projection, I believe, is 43 or 0.7.
43.7 million?
Yes,
And what's the revised estimate for 23?
I don't think it's been revised. It's the
It
same.
hasn't been? Okay. Do you all have the estimated transfer to the general fund for 24?
Yes, I think it's very close to the 23. How's that? Yeah, 24 is 43.975.
43 point,
975, so basically 44.
Thanks for that. And when you provide the, let's just take the 2022 transfer to the general fund, that includes both the lottery and just tell us what's
And
included in
sports
it.
wagering.
Okay.
So yeah, so Gambit. to be
Got it.
particular,
Okay.
Not private.
Okay. And how much has the lottery brought into the district thus far for 2023 to date?
I mean, overall, OLG.
Yeah, well, there's just the two things you just mentioned, lottery and
sports wagering.
Gambit.
So you are.
Yeah.
And.
So the transfer number,
Yes.
yep, as of February 2023, it's 12.5 million.
For which one?
Oh,
Broken out, yeah.
broken, out. So 696,000
It's
is
sports.
sports.
696,000 is sports,
Yeah, and then 11.8 is the rest. For lottery specific.
11.8 million for the lottery. And that's as of February? The end of
Correct.
February, okay. The mayor's budget this year has a proposed elimination for the special purpose revenue funds that provided funding to the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, the Early Childhood Development Fund, and we already mentioned gambling addiction services from sports wagering revenues. We talked a little bit about the addiction services piece, but to date, what's the net total across fiscal years that OLG has transferred to these funds?
Well, I think those funds are based on private operated sports wagering, so we don't transfer any funds to those programs directly. That's all based on the tax from,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's collected.
right, and we don't collect that tax.
I know, but do you know how much it is, though, the amount?
I can tell you how much tax the actual private operators have provided. And so in 21, they provided 2.2 million. In 22, it was 1.4 million. And I think to date, I have through March, actually 839,000.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mhm.
According to your testimony during the performance oversight hearing, the district ranked 7th in the nation in terms of transfer of tax revenue on a per capita basis. And I was interested to follow up and understand better if you could explain how that is calculated. Does the per capita include non-adults, that is, people who are not of the age of majority who can actually place
Yes.
wagers?
And the reason that we do that is because the adult age varies by jurisdiction. So to keep it level playing field, it's that way. Every jurisdiction in the chart is based on the total adult population, not the.
But even though
gambling age.
the age to gamble might vary, why not just use the gambling age population of each jurisdiction?
I mean, we can. I think it's gonna still net out pretty similar, but we can
Okay.
provide it that way if you'd like.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting. I wasn't sure what went into that
Because like for
decision.
DC, I think it goes down to a little bit over 500,000. adult population compared.
Say
to-
that again, I'm sorry.
I
that was-
think it goes down, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I think the last time I looked, I think the adult population was a little over 500,000.
In DC.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the daily visitors, right?
Mhm.
Is that something that you factor
Not
into
at
your
all.
calculations to other jurisdictions? Not at
No.
all? And not for
Okay.
DC either?
No,
Okay.
it's all based on the resident population of those jurisdictions.
Okay. I just thought it was interesting because although we don't have nearly as many people from Maryland, Virginia coming into the district
Mhm.
To work as they had, or as we had pre-pandemic, I know we still have some. And so I was curious as to what the numbers might look like if you included that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to do because you don't know the
Yeah.
exact number.
Yeah.
You know,
There's some data though that the OCFO gets from Castle and others that give us a sense of how many swipes are happening during the day. Yeah, so it might be interesting. Maybe that's some area we can follow up with you all
yeah,
on.
I think the thing to keep in mind is our border states offer
Mhm.
sports betting, so the thought that they would bet here versus there is a little bit, you just don't know that rate of participation here versus in their home state.
Okay, okay.
I can tell you, I think last time in the oversight, we mentioned that we know on Gambit, we had about 15% of our handle was Maryland addresses. We do know some of that, but that's just for people that have registered. We don't know people who just play.
Okay.
Account.
Okay, I mean, it still might be worth just something that we could follow up on.
So can you sort of restate the exact ask?
It actually might be better if I give it a little bit more thought
Okay.
so that the question
Yeah.
is clear.
Any questions you have, please, and we will follow up.
Okay. I'm likely to have some more follow-up.
Okay.
On questions. We were talking about the CBE piece earlier, and I'm likely to have some more follow-up around that. I've got concerns just based on some of the auditing that had occurred previously. I do note your responses that you provided today. One area of concern is around the marketing component of the Gambit contract. I'm not sure I understand what's happening there. I know there was a letter from DSLBD to, was it OLG maybe? Around the CB component? Are you familiar with that?
Marketing from DSLBD?
No.
Oh,
There was a letter from DSLBD about the CBE component of the contract.
For Gambit.
Yes.
I mean, I don't remember the DSLBD letter specifically. I mean, with Gambit DC, we had originally, there was a subcontractor for Intralot for marketing and media services that we eventually stopped. They stopped being the subcontractor. And we started using our agency of record, Teodi, who is also a CBE.
What did you call it, an agency of?
record. So that's the agency for the Office of Lottery and Gaming. So they provide all the advertising and marketing services for the office
Through a contract?
through a contract. Yes.
Okay, but so the contract with Toyota, which I'm familiar with because it's come through, that's a council approved contract.
Yes, yes.
That is separate from the contract with Gambit.
The contract with Intralot, right? So Intralot is tasked with doing some of our marketing for Gambit.
Mhm.
And so they were subcontracting through a firm called Octane, some services for media buying and advertising and social media. And so that's what had started, but eventually we ended that and Intralot ended using that subcontractor and we shifted those services to Toyota.
So was the CBE plan that was submitted by the contractor to DSLBD, did it include Toyota?
No, because Intralot does not pay Toyota for those services. Those services are part of our contract.
So the CBE compliance component for the sports wagering contract will not include any funds that you all are spending on Toyota.
Yes, I guess that's correct, except for media buying that Toyota does, that goes directly, I believe. Right, it's not part of Intralot's contract.
Okay, do you all have the information as to compliance? I know DSLBD does compliance in this area, but I'm sure, given the amount of scrutiny,
Mhm.
the level of audits and all the media attention that you all are tracking this pretty closely.
Yeah.
Is the contractor on track to meet its CBE spend goals?
Okay, you mean Intralot specifically, correct?
Yes.
So, as you know, and I think we talked about this before, and we shared all the correspondence as well that we've seen on this from DSLBD. Intralot has till the end of the contract to meet their obligation. And so I believe DSLBD in their communications noted to them that they felt, there was a gap there. And DSLBD and Intralot have been working together to work through that concern that DSLBD had.
Okay, but you all are not concerned.
Well, we always are very committed to CBE and want to make sure our vendors meet their commitments. And so we've actually communicated with Intralot that we want to make sure that they understand that they need to meet their commitments.
Okay. Well, my question is, are you all concerned at this point?
They have a new CEO and he's committed with DSLBD to address it. So I think I'm not concerned yet.
Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions that I'm asking at this moment. Obviously, I think there are a number of areas where we want to follow up with you all.
Mhm.
Hopefully your team has noted it. I know my team has.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the record before
Yeah, I'd
we
like
adjourn?
to just address Commissioner Patel's comments a little bit. I think.
And I intended to ask you to do that.
Yeah,
So I'm glad that you are.
so,
brought that up.
Because I think, as you know, Chairman Duffy, the way that the hearings are conducted, it makes it very, I can't speak to her directly. So I think one thing I wanted to mention was our response, the way that she sort of has taken it was never the intent. We copied your office on that. Hopefully you were able to read it and see that there was nothing contentious in the way that we responded. I think if anything, we want to provide any support that they need, answer any questions. We have supported ANCs in the past. We've gone to meetings, we've gone to hearings. I think the one thing that's missing in there is the invitation and the reach out, which has not happened. And reaching me is very simple. It's very easy. We have a main number. It's not hard to do. We did respond. We will assist in any way possible. So I'm not sure where sort of that sense is coming from Commissioner Patel. But again, I'm more than happy if she would like to set up a meeting or invite us to an ANC meeting. We are more than happy to go. And we've actually taken some of those comments and the regulatory team is now being even more proactive. So once we see an applicant come up in the ABRA list for a sports betting endorsement, we will reach out to the ANC and ask them if they need assistance rather than wait for them. We're also creating ANC specific documentation so that that way they have it in case they have questions. But I just want to be clear, there was never any ill intent. I think what I was waiting for was communication and that request or the invitation.
Okay.
And that's
Well,
all.
we appreciate you putting that on the record. We will facilitate that follow-up communication in case Commissioner Patel is not currently listening. She has included us on the communication you all have in your responses, so we appreciate
Right.
that. And I don't want to speak for ANC 2A. I'm sure they have a really robust agenda that they have planned for the next meeting. But it sounds like you are offering yourself and your team to meet with them. And if
Yes.
there's a mutually agreeable date and time in which you all can do that, it seems like it would be most helpful. So
Yep.
maybe Commissioner Patel and the chair of ANC 2A will take you up on that and extend an invitation to you to participate. Maybe it will eliminate some of the things that might not be conveyed fully in the written communication that you all have had.
Yep, hopefully so. And again, I copied, I believe, everyone in the ANC on the commission on the response. So hopefully they receive that, and I can easily reach out to Commissioner Patel and ask her if she'd like to have a meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your testimony. Thank the CFO and his team for the earlier testimony. And as always, we want to thank the public witnesses who've taken time out of their schedules to provide oral testimony before the committee today, and those who have also provided written testimony for the record. This marks the end of the committee's budget oversight hearings. The hearing record for today's hearing will close on Friday, April 14th at 5 p.m. The committee will next convene on Tuesday, April 25th at 9:30 a.m. for a public hearing on the following two measures. Bill 25-71, the Children's National Hospital Research and Innovation Campus Equitable Tax Relief Amendment Act of 2023. Bill 25-136, the Golden Triangle Bid Improvement District Amendment Act of 2023. Public witnesses must register by Friday, April 21st, 5 p.m. In order to testify at that hearing. The time is now 12:26 p.m. And this hearing is adjourned.